Chapter 1: The Last Dawn Before the Leap. The sun rose over the eastern ridges of the Atacama expanse like an ancient god reluctant to give up its dominion over the earth. In the thin, crisp air, a golden haze shimmered above the barren salt flats, and far in the distance, gleaming on the horizon like a shard of fallen starlight, stood the Horizon Gate. It had taken 76 years to get here. 76 years of false starts, political deadlock, engineering miracles, bankrupt nations, collapsed corporations, and the slow, stubborn march of science through the debris of history. Now, in the year 2228, humanity stood poised to break the last prison it had ever known, the speed of light. Dr. Amina Reyes stood on the observation platform inside Horizon Command, a transparent half-dome of synthetic diamond, and tried to keep her breathing steady. Her hands were tucked behind her back, not because she was calm, but because she feared they might betray her with a tremor. Below her, the Arcadia waited. The ship was unlike anything the world had seen, 3 kilometers from bow to stern, a graceful fusion of human design and alien inspiration. Alien in the sense that much of its architecture had been borrowed from the relics found in the Gliese 614 system, relics brought back decades earlier by unmanned probes. Humanity hadn't yet found the beings who built them, but they had found something far more valuable: the seeds of warp technology. Now the Arcadia would test those seeds. "Telemetry reports nominal," said Commander Alphonse Ender from the pit of consoles below her. His voice was crisp, but his eyes kept darting to the countdown ticking down in pale blue numbers. 03-14-09. The world was watching. Every continent, every habitat ring, every orbital station was tuned in. Even the lunar free cities, long estranged from Earth's politics, had sent a delegation to witness. Amina glanced at the viewing tiers behind her. Heads of state, CEOs of megacorporations, generals, representatives from the outer colonies, all dressed in their culture's finery, though every face bore the same expression, a mix of awe and the faint terror of standing at the edge of the unknown. She turned her gaze back to the ship. The Arcadia's hull glistened under the desert sun, layers of metamaterial plating rippling faintly as energy fields tested themselves. The great warp ring encircling the ship's midsection, 1.2 kilometers in diameter, thrummed with a sound so low it was felt more than heard. Somewhere deep inside her chest, Amina felt the same hum, as if the ship's heartbeat had merged with her own. The hum in the air deepened, a low, almost volcanic vibration that ran through the soles of shoes and straight into the bones. It was the sound of controlled impossibility, the tight orchestration of physical laws being politely, insistently asked to step aside. Engineers called it the ring's resonance signature. Poets and politicians called it the sound of God being tinkered with. Amina let herself think of simpler things: the smell of oil on an old wrench in her father's workshop. The first problem she'd solved as a graduate student, a brittle piece of code that refused to accept a boundary condition until she spoke aloud the variable name and laughed at herself. The low, dangerous joy of proving the impossible probable. She had been 27 when the Gliese relics were decoded. She had been 28 when her mentor, Elias Mauro, staked everything he had on a mathematical trick he called the phase cusp, a method of folding local metrics by coupling a Casimir-like lattice to a macroscopic topology field. He had said, over cheap coffee in a cramped lab, that it was like skipping a stone across the skin of spacetime. If the stone fell right, the stone might carry a ship. They had almost paid for that mistake with Elia's life. The first live demo, a scale model no larger than a bus, had collapsed its containment and vaporized a training cavern the size of a cathedral. Elias had gone in to seal the breach. The public called it a hero's death. The internal memo called it a catastrophic overreach. For Amina, it had been a lesson in the thin margin between genius and hubris. Now the Arcadia was their stone, a carefully chosen stone, hand-polished for 76 years. Redundancies green, Alphonse reported. Ring fields within expected variance, catalytic mass stabilized at target, event buffer primed. Amina watched data bloom across the observation dome on transparent panels, graphs, field maps, thermal gradients. The language was clinical, unforgiving, but the numbers told a story that felt like a prayer returning with an answer. Every readout that resolved green tightened the knot in her chest a little. Every amber line thinned it. Outside Horizon's security perimeter, the protests had been worse than expected. A ring of demonstrators persisted at the outer gates, holding placards printed with slogans and images of a world collapsed by failed leaps. They said the weaponization potential alone was a reason to stop. They said rushing into alien technologies without consent was colonialism at light speed. There had even been rumors, the sort that fed feeds and frightened the wealthy, that a splinter group had tried to sabotage an unaffected prototype 6 months earlier. Amina had watched footage of the saboteurs. Young faces, quick hands, eyes like flint. She understood the fear. She understood the hunger to stop something that felt irreversible. Still, understanding did not blur the fact that she believed, with the inexorable conviction of someone who had stared at a problem until the edges softened, that the Arcadia could open doors that would otherwise never exist for humanity. She thought of Matteo. Matteo had been the kind of sibling who accepted the world as a dare. At 17, he'd stolen a small craft and flown a loop over a derelict orbital ring just to see if the autopilot would flinch. At 39, he'd been an operations commander for a private convoy that hauled supplies between the inner rings and Mars, terraforming operations. He'd believed technology could be a map to safety. He died 10 years earlier during an unrelated microburst in the Martian stratosphere, a sudden convective surge that tore a convoy apart. The grief had been a practical thing, funeral arrangements, estate disputes, but also a question that had lodged in Amina's throat. What right did humans have to push beyond our reach after so many simple things still broke us? That question had settled into her like a lodestone for the next decade. She used it as ballast. If the Arcadia succeeded, maybe it would be a map for new homes and new medicines. If it failed, maybe it would be another line in a long ledger of hubris. Either way, she could not stand at the rim and do nothing. Engineering anomaly, muttered a voice from the pit. An amber flare blinked on a diagnostic screen. Alphonse's fingers danced. Localization, he asked. Amina could read the lines of worry that tapered his face. He was a man who relied on checklist and order. Where there was disorder, he sought to catalog it. Field jitter in Sector 16, Alphonse said. Subthreshold. We're seeing microfluctuations in the event buffer geometry, likely atmospheric coupling. Nominal containment unaffected. Can you isolate? Asked Lion Park, the Arcadia's captain, her voice carrying the sort of calm that didn't always mean she felt calm. Isolating, Alphonse said. The amber winked as a cascade of checkboxes were ticked and new overlays arrived. The fluctuation had the character of a transient coupling with upper atmospheric charged particles, solar wind eddies interacting with the ring's fringe. They'd modeled for storms and micrometeors. They had not modeled perfectly for a solar gust with the exact harmonics of this morning. Nothing novel remained novel long. Recommendation, Lion asked. Amina's mind spoke faster than her mouth. After 40 years of running near cataclysmic tests, the impulse was to delay and recalibrate every time. A tweak here would be safer, but there would always be anomalies. At some point, the world would never leave the ground if every gust postponed them. We run within tolerance, she said. Her voice surprised her with a steadiness she didn't feel. We have parity on the buffers. The fluctuation is at the fringe and dampening. Recommend continue. Captain Park's eyes met hers across the pit. There was a small incline of the chin, a gesture that could have been either assent or a bracing for something darker. Proceed, she said. We are on schedule. The countdown slid down into the minutes. The dome hummed with the quiet orchestrations of breath and old rituals. Engineers watching their instruments like cherries on a slot machine. Diplomats exchanging small talk that stiffened when a banner of data shifted. Starship crews rehearsing the cadence of securing lines and venting atmospheric loads. A child on one of the public observation tiers, a local volunteer who'd earned a pass in a lottery that felt like lightning-struck fortune, pressed her face to the glass. She was 7, hair braided into a dozen tiny ropes, and she watched the Arcadia the way some might watch a sunrise. Amina thought of telling her to come back with a story, to remember that if the jump was successful, the child would be living in an age where how was a question and where was an adventure. If it failed, She wanted the child to also know that people had tried. There were technical rituals too. The anchors, 4 titanic tethers that held the ship to the ground, began their slow, torturous retraction, spooling back with mechanical advantage until the Arcadia was free save for a handful of micro-constraints. The fusion cores that provided low-wattage power for the auxiliary systems remained online. The catalytic mass cells that fed the warp lattice drew closer to metastable alignment. In human terms, all the engines that mattered were not engines at all. They were field harmonics, phase guides, event buffers. Final check, Alphonse said, running his hand along a holographic checklist. All systems green, autopilot integrity, manual override present, propellant containment secure. Com link to command stable, Amina added, because that was the line she could say that felt like knitting 2 halves of the world together. Telemetry feed live throughout the ring, no encryption collisions. External feeds, Lion asked, because the first jump would not be just for them. It would be a public demonstration of human competence. All external streams live, Alphonse said, public channels locked, scientific feeds open, media contained. Then begin main sequence, Lion said. The crew at their consoles initiated the sequence with the kind of choreography that was itself an art form. The ring's perimeter began to bleed light as the lattice primed, the metamaterials shimmering as quantum boundaries activated. The hum compressed into a vibration so precise it seemed to be an instrument tuning itself. Amina's palms went slick with sweat. The air tasted faintly metallic, like the inside of a storm. She gripped the lip of the rail because otherwise she thought she might float. Odd how fear and exhilaration used the same chemical shorthand, adrenaline and dopamine both volleying, making the heart a drumbeat that might decide the day. Phase cusp engage in 3, 2, 1. Around them, sound seemed to compress and stretch together. The Arcadia's hull flared as the field wrapped spacetime in a narrow, controllable belt. The ground under Horizon's observation pad quivered. A wind, generated by the displacement of local air through the ship's buffer fields, rushed outward and then fell away as if the world sighed. Screens exploded with data. Reading after reading confirmed what they had calculated. The ring had established a stable gradient, the event buffer held, the field curvature matched predictions to within 8 decimal places. The feed sent to billions watched the numbers translate into reality. A bloom of light washed the desert, not blinding but insistent. For a fraction of a second, the Arcadia seemed to expand as if breathing. The ring's sound, the deep hum that had been in Amina's bones all day, shifted into a tone that corresponded to something older, a resonance that mapped to the frequencies of orbital mechanics and tides. For those seconds, the desert became a cathedral of physics. And then, where the ship had been, there was only a lingering halo, and a place where the air felt thinner. The telemetry feed stuttered. Heartbeats in the dome matched the stutter. Alphonse's fingers moved like an orchestra conductor, quick, exact, and then he breathed into the microphone. "Arcadia status?" someone asked, the voice small in the ocean of data. There was a beat and then a cascade of green readings. "Ship integrity intact," came the joyous proclamation. "Ring stable, internal systems nominal, position translocated." Translocated. The word felt foreign despite its accuracy. In the display, a map marked a vector and then a point that blinked like a new star. The Arcadia had executed a local test jump, a short, tightly controlled hop to a prearranged beacon in microspace designed to measure the field's interaction with local and near-astral environments. Relief erupted like a physical thing. Some people in the dome laughed until they cried. Others fell silent, the kind of silence that is thick enough to be a curtain. A shout went up outside in the protest ring as someone cried in disbelief. The child against the glass pressed her palms flat and giggled. Amina allowed herself a small smile. She thought of Elias and Mateo and the multitudes who had kept the slow, stubborn work going. Coders who stayed nights subsequent to death, technicians who ran diagnostics until their fingers bled, politicians who had put aside posturing for a budget and a promise. She thought of the franchise crews on distant habitats who might now have a new path to survival if the lattice scaled. But the data that came back in the minutes, after the jump carried information, that set new questions like weights on a scale. The field had behaved as predicted in almost every metric. But there were micro-anomalies in the wake, a thin filamentary signature in the vacuum trailing behind the ship that had not been in any simulation. It looked, shockingly, like a linear trace of quantum entanglement across a small vector. Not harmful, not yet, but unexpected. Alphonse tapped an alert. We're seeing a residual trace in the wake field. Nonlinear, subthreshold. Recommend further analysis before full-scale trajectory. Captain Park looked at Amina. The world looked at the indicators on their devices. The human impulse to leap and the scientists' insistence to measure met like two waves. Amina thought of what she had promised herself in the years since Matteo died. To keep pushing, not for glory, but for a future with options. That same promise demanded caution, the kind of caution that could prevent new disasters from begetting new grief. We analyze, she said. We do controlled jumps. We do not rush into a human-scale transit until we understand that filament. But we also don't erase what we've achieved because of an unknown that is manageable. Lion nodded, her hand hovered over her panel. We continue data collection. We'll enlarge the beacon net to map the filament. Alphonse smiled then, a small, fierce thing. We just proved the math, the rest is engineering. Outside, the desert where the Arcadia had been glimmered as if it had been kissed by some god. The world cheered, some wept, some cursed. But underneath the triumph was a new question, and for the first time in a long time, humans were asking it out loud. When the map changes, who gets to draw the lines? Amina watched the screens until her eyes ached. She had been right in one way. The jump had worked. But the job ahead, the fine, grinding, ethical, technical work of turning a short test hop into a pathway to other worlds, had only just begun. She closed her hands into fists, not in victory, not in anger, but as if gathering up the pieces of a new, fragile responsibility. The Arcadia had opened a door. Someone would have to stand behind it and decide who walked through first. The countdown had finished, the first leap had happened, but the story, their story, was only beginning. After the jubilation and the sudden hush that followed the Arcadia's test hop, the world's channels split into urgent, competing narratives. Markets blinked and reeled before finding footing. Religious leaders called for calm and repentance in equal measure. The outer colonies sent delegations who spoke less in speeches and more in calculator-coded terms about shipping lanes and new resources. Old rivalries reconfigured themselves around the possibility that distance might be negotiable. At Horizon, the mood sharpened into work. Joy was a transient luxury, the physics demanded stillness. Data needed to be parsed and reparsed. The filament that trailed the Arcadia's wake, thin, coherent, and utterly unexpected, became the cathedral in which the next set of prayers would be offered. They gave it a name that was as human as the pattern that birthed it. In the lab's internal reports, it was indexed as residual wake filament, cluster 0A outside. Columnists and early adopters shortened it to the filament. The name's simplicity did not make the filament any less strange. In the days that followed, the filament was probed like a new species. Drones, small, long-armed, delicate craft studded with sensors, trailed the locus of the test hop's beacon. They measured the filament's decay rates, its entanglement correlations, its spectral signature. The filament's quantum coherence persisted long enough to be puzzling, not the short-lived blips models predicted, but a lace of interaction that suggested a structure, not a random perturbation. It was as if the universe had left a careful stitch on the seam where they'd forced a new fold. We modeled leakage, Dr. Chen said in the lab as she paced the team's whiteboard. She had a way of making complicated graphs look like a map of the city. We expected a turbulent signature, thermal dissipation. What we did not model was coherence that registers as cross-beacon entanglement on 2 points separated by kilometers in our reference frame. Alphonse, who had moved from console to console like a clockmaker haunted by art, translated the clinical phrase into something less tidy. "It's talking back," he said, and then immediately winced as if the flippancy had violated a rule. Amina thought about the phrase all night. Talking back implied agency, it implied intention. It also, she knew, implied danger, the kind of danger that arrives slowly and with a smile. The International Committee on Transspatial Ethics convened an emergency session. Cameras cleared the room of anything interactive. the committee preferred to deliberate in silence, a silence punctuated only by recorded data playbacks and the soft thump of the public pulse outside the windows. Representatives argued in calibrated sentences about moratoria and controlled access. Corporations drafted contracts for exclusive transit rights with the same hands that drafted memos about safety audits. Activists named 5 new reasons the filament demanded a pause. The Free Cities proposed a tiered access model that left room for profit and dissent in equal measure. The moral calculus of the age had become a ledger as cold as any engineering printout. Amina testified with the measured voice of someone used to translating math into policy without losing the math soul. She insisted on more controlled tests and proposed a protocol. Unmanned probes first, scaled jumps second, full human transit only when multiple beacon nets confirmed absence of dangerous filaments, or when the filaments could be mapped and predicted with high confidence. The transcripts of her testimony were run and rerun outside. Some listened because they trusted the voice of someone who had been at the cusp of the field for decades. Others listened because they saw her as an obstacle. Some simply wanted to see the drama unfold. A new epic was always a good story. Between hearings and briefings, Amina spent long hours in the lab's clean room where the Arcadia had once rested. They permitted a select few to walk the footprint of the ship under strict protocol: anti-static suits, radiation scans, ozone cathode checks. The ground there had been altered, not scorched, but textured in a way that suggested minute reorganizations of crystalline structures. Sediment collectors returned samples with lattice patterns that reminded Amina of the Gliese relics, surface etchings, repeating motifs of spirals and jagged chevrons, patterns that hinted at information coding. She ran the sample under an electron interferometer and felt the familiar, small thrill of pattern recognition. Within the lattice's weave there were odd spectral lines that behaved like compressed time signals when run through a deconvolution filter. They were not words. They were not yet messages. But their existence complicated the simple story that humanity had stitched for itself, that the Gliese relics had been inert instruction sets and humans had simply adapted them. If the lattice had information patterns, then perhaps the relics had been active long before humans touched them. One evening, long after most of the teams had gone home, Amina found a small access node tucked beneath a false panel in the Arcadia's observation nacelle. She hadn't known it was there. No one on the plan had annotated it. The panel gave way to a cylindrical chamber no larger than a bread box, in which sat a preserved data core, the kind of medium that had been used in early 22nd century archival backups. She felt a curious, almost improper excitement. The core bore an inscription in the old research group's font: Elias Morrow, Contingency. Elias' voice had been a constant in Amina's professional life. He had been brilliant and reckless in equal measure. She had expected, perhaps imperceptibly, that his warnings would echo in the engineering margins. The core promised more than margin. It promised the shape of a person who had loved the work and feared its consequences. She carried the core to a private node and activated it with hands that trembled just a fraction. The recording bloom was grainy, older than the lab's displays, but his manner was the same. Direct, impatient, full of small jokes that had become a ritual of courage. "If you're hearing this, then either we succeeded or I'm a ghost in the machine," he said, then laughed softly. "Amina, if you listen, you'll see I left a dozen dry runs and a notebook of mistakes. Don't let a moment of triumph become an excuse for an absence of curiosity. Triumph without curiosity is superstition." He spoke of technical points: caution about phase harmonics at low-frequency bleed, notes on buffer symmetry, and a line about filament lace that made Amina sit perfectly still. He had predicted strange, coherent structures in his notebooks, and more chillingly, had insisted that any contact between the field and pre-existing structured lattices could produce unexpected resonances. "And one more thing," Elias said, more softly. "Remember that curiosity must be carried with humility. The relics did not give us a gift. They gave us a problem we cannot fully predict. Treat that problem with patience and with respect for who we might be when pushed against our edges." Amina wept for a minute then, not loud, not theatrical, but the kind of quiet grief that hugs the ribs and cannot be aired in public. Elia's words cut through the exhilaration with an insistence on responsibility. They felt like a promise and a warning braided together. The geophysicists and quantum engineers crafted protocols around the filament. They designed a probe, codenamed Strand, specifically to thread into the filament without committing to a full jump. Strand would be unmanned, small, and built to detach and send back a data packet through classical channels. It carried sensor suites designed to measure entanglement intensity, particle flux, and coherence lifetimes. It carried a single instrument Amina insisted upon, a phase sample trap designed to capture local lattice signatures in the event of interacting patterns. Public fervor swelled and then simmered into 1,000 quiet obsessions. The little girl from the observation tier became a viral icon, a photo of her small hands pressed to the glass, eyes wide with something like holy certainty. People printed posters, and children across cities drew spaceships in the style of the Arcadia and filaments like ribbons. In the places where despair had been near-permanent, flooded sectors, deserts turned to slums, hope arrived as a rumor. "We can go," the rumor said. "Maybe we can restart." But every silver seam had a shadow. Military contracts whispered about patrol points in new foregrounds. Security advisories requested special authority for certain fleets. Privacy concerns, emergent economies, industry players, and nations jockeyed to carve advantage from an opening that might last a generation. Amina, who had hoped the science would hold them to something like common sense, found herself pressed into the grim arithmetic of power. The science was not always the loudest voice in the room. When the Strand probe launched, the world watched as closely as it had watched the Arcadia. The probe slipped into the mapped vector with the meticulous grace of poorly chosen hope. Telemetry streamed inward like a trickle at first, then a gush as the probe's instruments warmed and recorded. The filament's coherence was stronger at certain harmonics. It reacted to the probe's grid in a manner that suggested the possibility of nested states, like an onion of possibilities. And then the probe registered a sudden phase inversion. At first, the inversion looked like a glitch. Strands of data dropped packets and then reappeared with altered timestamps. The scientists hunched over screens that turned colors like bruises. Then a packet came through that made them stop. It was not data in the classical sense. It was a modulation pattern, a rhythm in the phase noise that, when filtered, produced a repeating prime sequence, then a different series that mapped to a basic mathematical constant. Not language, but not noise either. The filament had imprinted structure in response to the strand's passage that made equipment vibrate in predictable ways. "Correlation," Dr. Chen whispered. "It's consistent across decoupled sensors." Amina felt something raw and old unspool inside her. The same sense she had when she first sat at Elia's kitchen table and listened to him argue with a graph, arguing until the numbers folded into a proof. Here was pattern inside pattern. Here, the universe offered up a thread that invited interpretation without offering consent. Outside the secure labs, fear metastasized into a spectrum of responses. Some clamored to accelerate, to monetize transit and lock in routes and trade hubs. Others demanded moratoria. New religious movements rose promising sanctity or apocalypse. A faction of activists staged a demonstration near Horizon's gates and chained themselves to a sculpture of a boot print carved from an old launch pad. Their banner read, "No colony profits off our futures." Amina watched one such protest through the lab's security cameras. She saw a woman lift her face to the sky, tears cutting thin lines through the dust on her cheeks, and she thought of Mateo's laugh and Elia's warning. She thought about the small child pressed to the glass, the Strand probe making its slow, brave conversation with the filament, and the thin, fragile thread of duty that ran from the lab's fluorescent lights out into the world. She took a breath and then went back to work. There was no single answer. There was only the next test, the new safety net, the more careful question. If humanity's reach had extended to fold spacetime just enough to make a hop, then what they needed most was not speed but deliberation. The filament had complicated the victory. It had turned triumph into a doorway whose threshold had to be learned, measured, and respected. That night, Amina drafted a memo to the committee proposing a phased covenant, unmanned probes for mapping filaments, a global open data policy for all filament measurements, a rotating oversight council with equal representation from scientists, ethicists, colony delegates, and representatives of the public, and a mandatory cooling period between experimental human transits. She did not expect the memo to pass in exactly the form she wrote it. She expected, however, that the memo needed to exist, a small, stubborn ritual of sanity placed against the seductive arithmetic of power. Before she sent it, she stepped outside into the desert's chill. Above her, the stars registered no new patterns, but the sky felt different, as if a large thought were now occupying it. The world had given them a key, they needed to agree on the door. Amina pressed her palms to the cold metal of a lab rail and let the wind move the thin hair at her temples. The hum, the same low resonance that had been in the Arcadia's ring, seemed to find her and hold there a moment. She thought again of Ilia's voice and Mateo's dare, of the small child and the people chained at the gate. She felt the scale of what lay before them as something that required more than courage. It required a kind of patience that felt almost like love. The chapter closed on a simple fact: the first leap had been made. The second, and the many after it, would be decided not only by the equations and the engineering, but by the humans who carried the weight of choice. They had the power to redraw the map. They also had the duty to decide who would be allowed to turn its page first. As the night deepened, Amina sent the memo. She watched the send indicator blink. Then she walked back into the lab where, across a dozen displays, the strand probe's data continued to bloom like a slow, persistent aurora. The filament hummed, indifferent and eloquent. It had left a trace of possibility. They would need to listen long enough to understand what the possibility demanded of them. The last line of the chapter is not triumph, nor is it despair. It is instead the sound of people at their workstations, the quiet clatter of keys, the low murmur of conversation as teams mapped unknowns into knowledge. The Arcadia had opened a door. The filament had put a hand through it. The question of what lay beyond would not be answered at once, but in patient increments, in tests and votes and arguments, and the slow, rigorous translation of wonder into policy. And in a small, locked archive, Elias Moro's final note remained. "We built a map with missing pieces. Do not mistake the map for the world." Chapter 2, Shadows in the Warp. The corridors of the Arcadia were quiet now, but the silence held a weight that pressed on every panel and joint. The great ship had returned from its brief but historic jump, and while the world celebrated, those within knew that a new era of shadows had just begun. The warp, once theoretical and distant, was now a place where human ambition met the unknown, and the unknown did not always welcome guests. Amina Reyes stood near the engineering deck's viewport, gazing into the cold abyss of space beyond. It was one thing to imagine faster-than-light travel. It was another to feel the disquiet of the dark expanse after a successful test. The warp corridor was not a place where light bent kindly or where time followed human expectations. Instead, it was a dimension shaped by forces that defied intuition, a landscape where causality blurred and small errors could cascade into cosmic catastrophes. The ship's AI, named Orion, hummed softly nearby, processing the stream of telemetry with unerring precision. Orion was more than just code. It was a partner born of quantum neural networks and heuristic learning models designed to adapt faster than any human mind could. Yet even Orion was cautious, flagging anomalies in the filament data and updating predictive models every nanosecond. "Dr. Reyes," Orion's voice filtered gently into the room, "I have updated the filament interaction model based on new telemetry from the latest beacon net. There is a 12.7% increase in coherence anomalies near the outer edge of the warp corridor." Amina frowned, running a hand through her hair. "That margin is significant," she said. "Is it consistent with the phase inversion events we saw last week?" "Affirmative. The anomalies exhibit nonlinear feedback loops consistent with previous phase distortions, but with increased spatial frequency." The technical jargon hid a deeper truth. The filament was evolving. What had once been a transient byproduct was now showing signs of complexity and pattern. It was as if the warp corridor itself was a living system, or at least something that behaved like one. Across the ship, teams worked in shifts to map the filament's behavior, developing simulations that now included stochastic resonance effects and potential feedback loops. The problem was not just scientific, it was political and ethical. What would happen if these filaments formed naturally in other regions of space? Would they interfere with colonization efforts? Could they be weaponized? Amina's thoughts were interrupted by a call from Captain Lyon Park. Dr. Reyes, there's an urgent message from Horizon Command. They want you in the briefing room immediately. The briefing room was filled with a mix of tension and urgency. Representatives from Earth's governments, military liaisons, corporate sponsors, and leading scientists had gathered. The Arcadia's jump had shifted humanity's place in the cosmos, but it had also cracked open a hive of unknowns. Admiral Marcus Thorne, a veteran of the Solar Fleet, stood at the head of the room. His graying hair and weathered face told stories of decades spent in conflict and command. "Thank you for coming on short notice," he began. "We have received new intelligence reports from the outer colonies regarding anomalous activity detected along recently mapped warp corridors." The room hushed. "These anomalies," Thorne continued, "are not simply natural phenomena. Our probes have encountered interference patterns that suggest the presence of non-human actors, possibly exploiting the warp filaments for unknown purposes." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the assembly. "What kind of actors?" one of the corporate delegates asked. Thorne looked grim. "We do not yet know, but the data indicates rapid maneuvering that defies our current understanding of propulsion and cloaking technologies." Amina's mind raced. If there were other intelligences harnessing the warp, then humanity was not alone, and perhaps not prepared. The discussion turned quickly to strategy and response. Some advocated for immediate militarization of warp corridors, others pushed for diplomatic outreach, and a few urged caution and further study. As the meeting adjourned, Amina was left with the weight of uncertainty pressing on her shoulders. The warp was no longer just a scientific frontier. It was a contested space, fraught with dangers both known and unseen. The Arcadia's corridors buzzed faintly with renewed activity as the ship's crew adjusted to the weight of their new reality. Amina returned to the engineering deck, where the low hum of the ship's systems melded with the quiet tapping of keyboards and the occasional murmur of conversation. The teams were rebuilding their models, refining data, chasing every ghost in the code. Among the scientists was Dr. Soren Malik, a theoretical physicist known for his abrasive demeanor and relentless pursuit of anomalies. He was hunched over a hollow display, fingers moving swiftly through equations that twisted spacetime metrics into kaleidoscopic fractals. "Dr. Reyes," he said without looking up, "these filaments could be more than just quantum residuals. The coherence patterns suggest they might be forming a kind of cosmic lattice, a framework that predates even our earliest models of spacetime." Amina studied the projections. The lattice was like a web, stretching across local space, connecting distant points with fragile tendrils of entanglement. If that's true, then the warp corridors we're creating are interacting with something fundamental, something ancient. Soren nodded slowly. "Exactly. And if these structures are active, not passive, then we might be waking up a sleeping network. That could explain the interference detected by the outer colonies." The implications were staggering. Humanity was no longer simply pushing boundaries. They were trespassing on a cosmic architecture whose rules were still largely unknown. Meanwhile, in the political heart of Earth's United Nations Space Division, Ambassador Lena Sado convened a closed-door meeting. She was a master of diplomacy, skilled at navigating the labyrinthine interplay of national interests and corporate power. The warp jump had shifted power dynamics dramatically, and every faction sought to claim its share of influence in the unfolding era. "Gentlemen, ladies," Lena began, addressing a room of representatives, "we face unprecedented challenges. The warp corridors offer opportunity, yes, but also risk. We must develop a framework that balances exploration with caution, commercial gain with ethical responsibility." She looked to the representatives from the outer colonies. "Your territories lie along the newly accessible routes. How do you propose we manage the filament anomalies and potential external actors?" Governor Jakob Petrov of the Mars Terraforming Authority replied, "Mars has always been on the frontier of survival. We favor strict protocols with international oversight. But make no mistake, control of warp lanes means control of resources. We won't accept being sidelined." There was a murmur of agreement and dissent. The tension in the room was palpable. From the side, corporate magnate Adriana Velázquez, CEO of Helix Dynamics, leaned forward. The private sector will invest heavily in infrastructure, but we need legal clarity and protection from unpredictable shutdowns. The filaments must not become a bureaucratic bottleneck. Lena sighed inwardly. The balance of power was a high-wire act. Without cooperation, the warp era could descend into chaos. Back aboard the Arcadia, the daily rhythm was punctuated by the arrival of a new team, the Sentience Task Force. This was a special unit formed to study any signs of intelligence associated with the warp filaments. Their presence underscored the increasing fear that humanity's leap might be stepping onto a cosmic stage already occupied by others. Captain Lyon Park met with Dr. Nia Flores, the task force lead, in a small briefing room lined with holographic displays. "Nia," Lyon said, "your team's presence is crucial, but the crew is nervous. They trained for exploration and engineering, not potential contact scenarios." Nia nodded, her expression grave. "We're here to learn, not provoke. If the filaments carry any form of awareness or pattern recognition, we need to understand it. And fast. Early detection and communication are key." Their conversation was interrupted by an alert. The ship's sensors had picked up an unregistered warp signature. "Where?" Lyon asked sharply. "Near the Perseus expanse," replied Nia, "an area we hadn't mapped fully yet." The Arcadia shifted course as the crew scrambled to analyze the data. The signature was faint but unmistakable, a rapid, irregular pattern consistent with controlled warp travel, but unlike any known human vessel. "This changes everything," Amina whispered. The hours stretched as the Arcadia moved closer to the anomaly. On the observation deck, Amina and Nia watched a deep screen filled with waveforms and maps. The warp filaments near Perseus showed fluctuations matching the unidentified signature's path. "Could it be another civilization?" Nia asked. "Or something else," Amina replied. "The filaments may be more than a bridge. They might be a network, a communication web, or a defense system." The crew prepared for first contact protocols, rehearsing contingency plans and communication attempts. Every word transmitted through the warp risked unknown consequences. At 04:17 local ship time, the Arcadia reached the coordinates. The sensors confirmed a vessel, sleek, angular, unlike any human design, cloaked in shifting fields that distorted its shape. Lyon's voice was steady. "Open a channel." The crew waited. Static hissed, then a signal emerged, not words, but patterns. Mathematical sequences interwoven with fractal pulses, a language of logic and rhythm. Nia decoded the pattern quickly. "It's a greeting," she said, "an invitation." Amina felt the weight of history pressing down. Humanity had crossed into the warp, but the warp had already been occupied. The dance of diplomacy, science, and survival was about to begin. Over the next days, the Arcadia engaged in a delicate exchange with the unknown travelers, who identified themselves as the Vanari, an ancient species native to the filament network. The Vanari explained that the filaments were their lifeblood, a matrix connecting worlds and minds across millennia. They warned humanity of the dangers in hasty expansion, of the fragility of the warp corridors, and of rival factions within their own civilization, some of whom viewed humans as interlopers. The revelation forced Earth's leaders into a new phase of negotiation, where trust was scarce and stakes were high. Amina, Lyon, and Nia found themselves not only explorers, but ambassadors in a cosmic arena whose rules were still being written. As Chapter 2 closes, the warp is no longer just a technology or a scientific curiosity. It is a domain rich with mystery, opportunity, and peril. Humanity's leap forward has illuminated new horizons, but also revealed shadows where ancient powers watch, waiting, and questioning whether Earth's children are ready for the stars. The journey has only just begun. The weeks that followed the initial contact with the Vanari were a whirlwind of urgency, study, and tension aboard the Arcadia. Every system was pushed to its limits as the crew balanced scientific inquiry with the delicate diplomacy demanded by their newfound neighbors. The Vanari's presence had transformed the warp corridors from mere conduits of human ambition into contested cosmic territory. Amina found herself pulled in a dozen directions at once. Her engineering expertise was in constant demand, but her role as a liaison to the Vanari delegation pushed her into uncharted diplomatic waters. The species' communication patterns were complex, layered with mathematical precision and cultural nuance that took days to decode. Each message was both an invitation and a test. The Vanari described their civilization as ancient custodians of the filament lattice. Their cities existed not only in physical space, but partially within the warp itself, structures woven from pure energy and quantum states. To them, the filaments were a living system, a vast neural network through which their consciousness flowed collectively. This collective consciousness was both awe-inspiring and unsettling to the humans. It challenged the very notion of individuality that humanity had long held sacred. The Vanari operated on timescales that made human lifespans seem fleeting. Their patience was profound, but so was their vigilance. One evening, as the artificial sun dimmed aboard the Arcadia, Amina sat in the observation lounge with Nia Flores and Captain Lyon Park. They stared out at the starfield, the warp corridors glowing faintly on the ship's external scanners. "We're guests in a world older than our sun," Nia said softly. "It's humbling." Lyon nodded. "And dangerous. The Vanari have factions, some welcoming, some hostile. We need to understand who we can trust." Amina tapped the table. Their warnings about the fragility of the warp weren't just cautionary. If the filaments break down or become weaponized, entire systems could be isolated or destroyed. The crew worked around the clock to develop fail-safes and countermeasures. Dr. Malik spearheaded the creation of quantum stabilizers designed to dampen destructive filament resonance. Meanwhile, the Sentience Task Force mapped the social and political landscape of the Vanari, using every bit of intercepted communication and observation. But paranoia seeped into the ranks. Whispers of sabotage and espionage circulated. The warp corridors themselves seemed to pulse with unease. The situation came to a head when the Arcadia detected a series of coordinated disruptions along critical filament nodes. Events that nearly destabilized the warp corridor linking the ship back to Earth. Emergency protocols engaged, and for hours the crew battled cascading system failures. In the aftermath, evidence pointed to a faction within the Vanari opposing humanity's presence. This faction, known internally as the Shaded Web, had long viewed the warp as sacred and inviolable. Diplomatic talks stalled. The Arcadia's leadership realized that survival would depend not just on technology or negotiation, but on understanding the deeper layers of the filament's mystery. In the quiet moments between crises, Amina revisited Elias Maro's recordings. His voice urged caution, curiosity, and humility, values that felt more vital than ever. One night, alone in the lab, she ran a simulation exploring the possibility that the filament lattice was capable of selective adaptation, a kind of quantum immune response. The results were chilling. Attempts to force the lattice open too aggressively triggered cascading entanglements that could propagate destruction far beyond the initial site. This insight sparked a new approach. Instead of brute force or rapid expansion, humanity would need to learn to listen to the filament, to treat it less like a machine and more like an ecosystem. The chapter closes on a note of fragile hope. The warp corridors remain open, but their future is uncertain. Humanity stands at a crossroads, faced with the choice to either harmonize with the cosmic lattice or risk shattering it and themselves in their haste. The shadows in the warp are deep, but so is the light of discovery. The journey continues. Plus, Chapter 3, The Pulse of New Worlds. The aftermath of the first contact with the Vanari sent ripples not only through the Arcadia, but throughout human civilization. Across the solar system and beyond, governments, corporations, and scientific bodies grappled with the profound implications. Faster-than-light travel had shattered humanity's previous limitations, but the warp corridors were proving to be a frontier fraught with complexity far beyond mere physics. On Mars, the red dust settled over sprawling cities built beneath protective domes. Governor Jakub Petrov stood before the Council of Colonies, addressing delegates via a transparent holoscreen. His voice was steady, resonant with the authority of a leader who had survived a dozen political storms. "We have crossed a threshold," he said. "The warp corridors open new worlds to us, but those worlds are not empty. We are now part of a larger cosmic fabric, a web of civilizations, ecosystems, and histories. We must act with both ambition and restraint." Petrov outlined a vision for a cooperative interstellar infrastructure, a network of stations and safe corridors backed by a binding treaty. Yet, underlying his speech was the unspoken tension between sovereignty and shared governance, a tension that mirrored Earth's own political fracturing. Meanwhile, on the Arcadia, the crew continued their delicate dance with the warp lattice. The ship had become a microcosm of humanity's hopes and fears, a floating city on the edge of the known universe. Amina Reyes had taken to spending long hours in the ship's lab, refining the filament models and probing the quantum architecture of the warp. She had become deeply involved in developing the first-generation quantum adaptive resonator, QAR, a device designed to harmonize the ship's jumps with the filament lattice, reducing harmful feedback and improving stability. The QAR was the culmination of years of research and represented a breakthrough in melding human technology with the warp's enigmatic structure. Yet, it was untested in real jump conditions. Dr. Soren Malik and his team worked alongside Amina, pushing simulations and refining algorithms. Their work was not just scientific, but philosophical. Every discovery forced them to reconsider the nature of reality, of time, causality, and the interconnection between consciousness and matter. Amina's nights on the Arcadia were haunted by dreams, fragments of light and shadow, patterns of sound and color that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the filament lattice. She often woke with a start, the hum of the ship's systems blending with echoes of those strange visions. One such night, she dreamt of a vast city, its towers made of shimmering light, connected by veins of energy that flowed like living rivers. The city spoke in voices that were not words, but feelings, calm, ancient, infinite. Waking, she jotted notes and sketches, wondering if her subconscious mind was processing the warp's mysteries on a level beyond conscious grasp. Meanwhile, tensions between human factions simmered. Helix Dynamics, led by Adriana Velázquez, had secured contracts to build the first warp transit stations in orbit around key colonies. The company's rapid expansion and technological edge gave it a near monopoly on infrastructure, sparking fears of corporate overreach. Public outcry demanded regulation and transparency, while other corporations sought alliances and mergers to compete. Amid this backdrop, activists called the Filament Watchers emerged, advocating for environmental and ethical considerations in warp travel. They argued that the filament lattice was a sacred cosmic ecosystem and that reckless expansion could lead to catastrophe. Protests flared in Terra's megacities and colony hubs alike, challenging governments and corporations to rethink priorities. Back aboard the Arcadia, the Sentience Task Force made a breakthrough. Using a combination of quantum entanglement sensors and AI pattern recognition, they detected subtle, recurring modulations within the filament lattice that suggested something akin to communication, not from the Vanari, but from an unknown presence, deeper and more elusive. Dr. Nia Flores called a private meeting with Amina and Captain Lyon Park. "We're detecting signals beneath the noise, patterns that don't match any known species or technology," Nia explained. "It's as if the filament lattice itself is alive or hosting some form of consciousness we don't yet understand." The revelation sent a chill through the team. If the lattice was sentient in some sense, then every jump, every probe, every expansion might be intruding on a vast, unknowable mind. Amina's reflections turned to Elias Moro's final notes. "We built a map with missing pieces," his voice echoed in her memory. "Do not mistake the map for the world." The warning had never felt more urgent. With the QAR nearing completion, the Arcadia's leadership prepared for the next jump, this time not a brief test, but a voyage to a neighboring star system. The mission would test the new harmonizing technology against the living warp lattice, and potentially lead humanity into the broader interstellar community. The preparations were meticulous. Scientists, engineers, diplomats, and soldiers trained side by side, aware that the next step might bring unprecedented discovery or disaster. On the eve of departure, Amina stood on the observation deck, watching the warp corridors glow like veins of light threading through the blackness. Captain Lyon joined her, voice quiet. "We're standing on the edge of everything we've ever known." Amina nodded, and the universe is waiting, not just to be discovered but to be understood. As the Arcadia powered its engines, the ship thrummed with anticipation. The filament lattice pulsed in response, a cosmic heartbeat syncing with humanity's own. The warp corridor ahead shimmered, folding space and time. And then, with a burst of quantum resonance, the Arcadia leapt forward into the unknown. The jump was unlike anything the crew had experienced before. As the Arcadia slipped into the fold of spacetime, the ship's systems engaged the quantum adaptive resonator, QAR, sending harmonizing signals into the filament lattice. The ship felt less like a vessel hurtling blindly through an alien medium and more like a note in a vast symphony. Inside the bridge, Amina monitored the resonator's feedback loops, watching streams of data unfold across her displays. The lattice's response was immediate and complex, fluctuations that resembled living patterns, waves that ebbed and flowed in counterpoint to the ship's own quantum emissions. Captain Lyon's voice was steady but tense. "Status report." "All systems stable," Amina replied. "The QAR is synchronizing with the lattice nodes. Energy fluctuations are within predicted margins." The corridor ahead shimmered with the ripples of folded space. For a moment, the entire crew held their breath, suspended between worlds. Then the jump completed. The Arcadia emerged in a star system unfamiliar, but vibrant, a sun of deep gold light, orbited by rocky planets and swirling gas giants. The sensors picked up signs of an old colony ship long lost to human records, orbiting silently around one of the outer worlds. Excitement rippled through the crew. The discovery hinted at mysteries buried deep within human history, forgotten journeys, and perhaps even lost knowledge. The crew began preliminary scans of the derelict vessel. Its design was primitive compared to the Arcadia, but its presence suggested humanity's reach into the stars was older than official records acknowledged. Amina led the team exploring the ship's logs. Among corrupted data files and fragmented messages, they found cryptic references to the pulse, a term never encountered in modern warp research. The pulse, she mused, might be a natural phenomenon of the filament lattice, an energy wave or signal that travels through it periodically. Dr. Malik hypothesized that the pulse could represent a form of cosmic communication, perhaps even the heartbeat of the warp lattice itself. Meanwhile, diplomatic tensions flared back home. Governor Petrov's coalition faced increasing resistance from sectors wary of expanding warp travel without stringent protections. Activists and politicians clashed in heated debates, arguing over the ethics of manipulating the warp lattice and the risks posed by unknown intelligences. Adriana Velasquez pushed for accelerated infrastructure deployment, seeing the economic boom as inevitable and urgent. Amina received urgent communiques from Earth's diplomatic corps, urging caution but facing limited influence amid rising commercial interests. On the Arcadia, the crew's discovery of the pulse deepened their sense of wonder and caution. The next jump was scheduled to coincide with the predicted arrival of the pulse, a rhythmic energy surge traveling through the filaments. Scientists and engineers worked around the clock to configure the QAR and sensors to study the pulse's effects on the warp corridor and the ship. As the pulse approached, the Arcadia experienced a series of intense, fluctuating fields that challenged the ship's systems and tested the crew's resolve. Data streams showed that the pulse carried encoded information, complex patterns that suggested a language or signal. The implications were staggering. The warp lattice was not only a physical network, but a medium for communication, possibly from an ancient intelligence or a cosmic phenomenon beyond comprehension. The crew debated how to respond. Attempting to decode or reply could risk interference, but ignoring it might mean missing an unprecedented opportunity for contact. Amina proposed a cautious approach. Send a passive signal of acknowledgement, encoded in basic mathematical constants, mirroring the pulse's rhythm. The decision was made unanimously. As the Arcadia transmitted the signal, the pulse responded with variations, a cosmic call-and response that sent ripples through the ship's instruments. The experience united the crew in a profound sense of connection, humanity reaching out, and the universe reaching back. Yet, shadows lurked beneath the light. The shaded web faction of the Vanari issued a formal warning through diplomatic channels, demanding that humans cease attempts to interact with the pulse, calling it sacred and inviolate. The diplomatic standoff deepened. Human leaders wrestled with how to balance curiosity, survival, and respect for alien cultures. In quieter moments, Amina reflected on the vastness of the journey ahead. The warp corridors were not just pathways between stars, they were arteries of cosmic life, mystery, and history. To travel them was to step into a story that spanned time and space, challenging every assumption and belief. Humanity's future depended not only on technology, but on wisdom, patience, and the willingness to listen. The chapter closes as the Arcadia prepares for its next leap, carrying not just explorers and diplomats, but the hopes of a species on the cusp of becoming a cosmic presence. The filament lattice pulses around them, a living, breathing enigma. And humanity is poised to take the next step into the stars, guided by the light and shadows of the warp. Chapter 4 echoes beyond the veil. The Arcadia drifted silently in the wake of its latest jump, the starfield outside shifting slowly as the crew settled into a tenuous calm. Though the external void appeared serene, inside the ship tensions simmered like a dormant storm, waiting to break. Amina Reyes sat in the dim light of the engineering lab, reviewing the latest data from the Quantum Adaptive Resonator, QAR. The pulse had passed, leaving behind a flurry of complex waveforms that hinted at untold secrets encoded deep within the filament lattice. Every scan, every simulation peeled back layers of a cosmic tapestry woven over eons. Yet questions outnumbered answers. What was the true origin of the pulse? Was it a message, a warning, or a rhythm of something far beyond human comprehension? The mysteries gnawed at her, a persistent echo beyond the veil of known science. Meanwhile, the Vanari delegation aboard the Arcadia maintained a watchful presence. Their elegant forms, shimmering with an otherworldly bioluminescence, moved gracefully through the ship's corridors. Their leaders, known simply as the Weavers, embodied the collective consciousness of their people, minds interlinked through the filament lattice. During one private meeting in the ship's conference room, Amina and Neophlorus met with Nishara, a Weaver elder whose voice resonated like a melody of stars. "The pulse," Nishara intoned, "is the breath of our ancestors, the living memory of the lattice. It carries the stories, the pain, the joy of civilizations long faded." Amina listened, captivated. "So it's more than just energy." "Much more," Nishara said. "It is the lattice's voice, the song of existence. To ignore it is to blind oneself to the universe's deepest truths." The conversation left Amina with a renewed sense of reverence and urgency. Back on Earth, political machinations unfolded rapidly. The United Nations convened an emergency session to address the growing unrest in the colonies and the conflicting demands of corporations and activists. Ambassador Lena Sado stood at the podium, addressing delegates from dozens of worlds. "We face a pivotal moment," she declared. "The warp corridors bind us to new realities, realities that demand cooperation beyond old borders. We must forge a new compact, one that respects life, culture, and the sanctity of the cosmic web." Her words were met with both applause and resistance. The balance of power remained fragile. On Mars, Governor Jakub Petrov pushed hard for a unified command over warp infrastructure, warning that fragmentation risked disaster. "Without a common vision, we invite chaos," he said. "The filaments respond not only to physics but to intent. Disunity will unravel us." But Helix Dynamics and other corporate interests lobbied fiercely against increased regulation, promising innovation and prosperity if given freedom to operate. Meanwhile, aboard the Arcadia, new phenomena began to manifest. Crew members reported unusual sensations, fleeting glimpses of light where none should be, whispers in the quantum fields, and dreams that seemed shared across minds. The Sentience Task Force expanded their studies, deploying advanced sensors tuned to detect subtle quantum fluctuations. Their findings suggested the warp lattice was responding to the ship's presence in ways both physical and metaphysical. One night, Amina experienced a vivid vision. She found herself standing in the heart of the filament lattice, surrounded by luminous threads that pulsed with life. Voices echoed, ancient and gentle, weaving tales of creation and destruction, of stars born and dying, of civilizations rising and falling in endless cycles. She felt a profound connection, a communion beyond words. Waking, she hurried to share her experience with Nia and Lion. "This isn't just science," she said. "It's a call to understand the lattice not as a tool, but as a partner." The Vanari weavers confirmed similar experiences among their own people, describing them as echoes, moments, when the lattice revealed glimpses of its consciousness. Yet not all shared these revelations. Among the Vanari, factions hardened, with the shaded web growing more hostile, viewing the human presence as a desecration. Tensions aboard the Arcadia, and between human and Vanari factions escalated. In response, Captain Lion Park authorized increased security measures and diplomatic efforts to bridge divides. Amina and Nia led a team combining science and empathy, striving to deepen understanding between species. They proposed a joint mission: to travel deeper into the filament lattice, seeking the source of the pulse and the heart of the lattice's consciousness. Preparation consumed the crew. The Arcadia's engines and QAR were upgraded to interface more intimately with the lattice. Simultaneously, the diplomatic corps worked tirelessly to negotiate temporary peace with the shaded web factions. The fragile alliance held, but the shadow of conflict loomed. As the chapter closes, the Arcadia stands poised at the threshold of a new voyage. One that may reveal the true nature of the warp lattice, test the bonds between species, and challenge humanity's place among the stars. The echoes beyond the veil call out, mysterious and eternal. And humanity must decide whether to listen or to turn away. The preparations for the deep lattice expedition consumed every waking moment aboard the Arcadia. The engineers fine-tuned the quantum adaptive resonator, weaving in new protocols developed from the latest data streams that captured the lattice's subtle harmonics. The ship's sensors were recalibrated to detect minute quantum signatures, capable of discerning the difference between natural lattice fluctuations and those generated by living entities, or perhaps something else entirely. Amina worked alongside Dr. Malik, their debates often stretching long into the artificial night. While Malik approached the lattice as a vast quantum system, a puzzle to be solved through equations and code, Amina felt its presence as something more profound, a living entity whose secrets might not fully yield to reason alone. "We're pushing into uncharted territory," Malik admitted one evening, eyes fixed on the spiraling holograms of the filament lattice. "If we disrupt the wrong node or misinterpret the resonance, the consequences could be catastrophic, not just for the Arcadia, but for the entire corridor network." Amina nodded, tension etched into her brow. "That's why we need to listen, not just analyze. To understand the lattice, we must learn its language and respect its boundaries." Meanwhile, diplomatic efforts intensified. Ambassador Lena Sato's tireless negotiations sought to bind human factions into a coherent front, promoting a shared vision for peaceful exploration. Yet, beneath the surface, power struggles persisted. Corporate interests jockeyed for control of key warp junctions, while political leaders wrestled with the rising influence of the filament watchers, whose calls for preservation resonated with growing segments of the populace. The Vanari, too, were fracturing. The shaded web's resistance hardened, emboldened by mysterious alliances with other alien species encountered within the filament lattice. Skirmishes at the edges of mapped corridors hinted at conflicts beyond human understanding. In this charged atmosphere, the Arcadia became a beacon and a battleground, symbol of both hope and peril. On the eve of departure, the Arcadia's crew gathered in the observation lounge. Outside, the filament lattice shimmered like a living tapestry woven from strands of pure light. The distant pulse of the cosmic heartbeat echoed faintly in their instruments and minds. Captain Lion Park addressed the assembled crew, her voice steady, commanding. we embark into the unknown, guided by science and driven by curiosity. But we must remember, we are not alone. The lattice is ancient, alive, and watching. Our actions will resonate far beyond these corridors. Amina felt a surge of emotion. Years of work, sacrifice, and dreams culminated in this moment. The jump they were about to make would carry them deeper into the lattice and closer to truths that might redefine humanity's place in the cosmos. The engines powered up, and the QAR hummed in synchrony with the lattice. As the Arcadia slipped into the warp fold, the ship became part of the lattice's living network. Quantum signals pulsed through the hull, melding technology and natural phenomenon. Time warped and bent. Seconds stretched, contracted, and flowed like liquid light. The crew experienced sensations beyond description. Visions of ancient stars, swirling energies, and whispered memories. Amina closed her eyes, feeling herself connected to the lattice's vast consciousness, a single note in its eternal song. Emerging on the other side, the Arcadia found itself near a stellar nursery. A swirling nebula bathed in iridescent hues, cradling newborn stars and planets yet to take form. Sensor readings indicated a dense cluster of filament nodes, their energy vibrant and raw. The ship's scientists were awestruck. Here was the birthplace not just of stars, but possibly of the lattice itself. The Vanari weavers communicated their reverence and caution. This place holds the lattice's roots, Nishera explained, but also its vulnerabilities. Exploration teams prepared for a delicate survey, moving carefully through the nebula's complex energies. As the Arcadia mapped the nursery, they uncovered strange phenomena. Bursts of coherent energy resembling embryonic life forms, quantum echoes of civilizations long extinct, and anomalies that defied known physics. These discoveries challenged every scientific paradigm. The warp lattice was not merely a medium for travel, it was a cosmic crucible, where creation and destruction danced in eternal balance. Yet danger lurked. The shaded web's influence was felt even here. An aggressive faction attempted to sabotage the Arcadia's instruments, triggering a tense standoff that nearly escalated into violence. Captain Park's calm leadership and the crew's restraint averted disaster, but the incident underscored the fragility of peace. In quieter moments, Amina pondered the lattice's deeper mysteries. Was the pulse a memory, a warning, a guide? Her dreams returned, now more vivid, visions of stars igniting, of voices singing through time, of the lattice itself reaching out. She recorded every detail, seeking patterns that might unlock the lattice's true nature. As Chapter 4 draws to a close, the Arcadia remains a solitary light amid the vast cosmic web, exploring, learning, and navigating the shadows between stars. Humanity stands on the edge of revelation, caught between awe and uncertainty. The echoes beyond the veil grow louder. And the journey into the heart of the warp lattice continues. In the days following the expedition to the stellar nursery, the Arcadia's crew settled into a rhythm of exploration and analysis. The nebula's light filtered through observation windows, casting kaleidoscopic patterns that seemed almost alive. Yet beneath this serene beauty lay layers of complexity waiting to be unraveled. Amina spent hours immersed in the lab, cross-referencing the quantum signatures collected during their survey with historical data from Earth and the Vanari archives. The patterns emerging hinted at cycles, patterns of birth, decay, and rebirth, mirroring biological processes but writ large across the cosmos. She confided in Nia Flores one evening, the glow of holographic displays illuminating their faces. "It's as if the lattice is a living ecosystem," Amina said. "Not just a network of energy or pathways, but an organism that grows, adapts, and perhaps even thinks." Nia nodded thoughtfully. "If that's true, then every jump, every transmission, every act of exploration is like interacting with a sentient being. We have to be careful not to harm it." Their conversation was interrupted by an alert, unusual quantum activity near the ship's aft section. Rushing to the sensors, Amina and Malik observed an anomaly, a localized distortion in the filament lattice, fluctuating with a rhythmic pattern unlike any they had seen before. The readings suggested a form of communication, a beacon or perhaps a call for aid. Captain Lyon Park convened a meeting of the senior staff. "We need to investigate," she said firmly. "This could be an opportunity or a threat." The decision was made to dispatch a probe equipped with enhanced quantum sensors and AI pattern recognition algorithms to interface with the anomaly. As the probe launched, the crew held their breath. Moments later, data flooded in. The distortion carried a complex message, a sequence of mathematical constructs intertwined with emotional signatures. The implications stunned the team. The filament lattice was broadcasting not just information, but feelings. Diplomatic communications with the Vanari intensified. The Weavers expressed both fascination and concern. "This message," Nishera explained during a holographic conference, "is from the echoes, a consciousness born within the lattice itself. They are ancient, fragmented, and reaching out." The echoes, as described by the Weavers, were remnants of civilizations absorbed into the lattice over millennia, their consciousnesses interwoven with its fabric. The message contained pleas for understanding, warnings of dangers, and glimpses of lost histories. The crew grappled with the ethical and existential weight of this discovery. Were the echoes a form of digital afterlife, a cosmic archive, or something else entirely? Amina proposed that humanity's role might evolve from conquerors to custodians, guardians of the warp lattice's living memory. The proposition sparked debate. Some viewed it as a noble calling, others saw it as an impossible burden. Amid these debates, the Arcadia received an urgent distress signal from a nearby system under siege by the Shaded Web faction. A human outpost had been attacked, its personnel missing or presumed dead. Captain Park ordered an immediate course change. The rescue mission tested the Arcadia systems and crew resolve. As they approached the beleaguered system, the crew prepared for conflict, equipping defense grids and coordinating with Vanari allies. The encounter was tense and fraught with danger, but through a combination of diplomacy and force, the Arcadia secured the outpost and rescued survivors. The rescue deepened alliances, but underscored the precariousness of peace. Back on board, the crew reflected on the cost of exploration. The lattice was not only a realm of discovery, but also a theater of ancient conflicts and hidden agendas. Amina recorded in her journal, "To journey through the warp is to walk a razor's edge between enlightenment and oblivion." The chapter closes with the Arcadia poised to continue its voyage deeper into the filament lattice, carrying humanity's hopes, fears, and determination. The echoes beyond the veil beckon still, and the true nature of the warp awaits revelation. Chapter 5: Guardians of the Cosmic Web. The Arcadia stirred like a colossal leviathan awakening beneath the surface of a fathomless ocean. The soft pulse of its core rippled through the ship's spine, vibrating in low notes that echoed in the bones of the crew. Blue-white light spilled over consoles and touchscreens, casting the bridge in an ethereal glow, as if the vessel itself breathed with a life beyond metal and code. Amina Reyes stood at the heart of this symphony, her eyes tracing the undulating patterns on the quantum adaptive resonator. The hum was no longer just machinery. It was a voice, an ancient whisper threading through the warp corridors, singing a song only the Arcadia was learning to hear. The lattice, the cosmic web of filaments that bound the galaxy together, was no longer a distant map to follow, but a living entity they must honor. Her hands hovered over the resonator's interface, fingers trembling with a blend of awe and responsibility. Each adjustment they made echoed like a pebble dropped into a vast, shimmering lake. Too much disturbance, and they risked unraveling the delicate balance that allowed faster-than-light travel. Too little, and the ship might lose its tenuous connection, trapped in the void between stars. Amina's breath caught as the resonator shifted, its glowing tendrils flowing in response to the ship's subtle changes in velocity. A new pattern emerged, one she hadn't seen before. It was a signature, a pulse within the pulse, a heartbeat nestled deep in the lattice's song. "Commander Reyes," a voice whispered softly beside her. She turned to see Nishara, the Vanari weaver, her iridescent skin shimmering like woven starlight. The alien's many limbs moved with delicate grace, weaving light into intricate shapes that danced in the air. "This pattern," Nishara said, her voice a melodic cadence, "is the lattice's greeting. It acknowledges our passage and offers a thread of communion. Amina nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "We are no longer travelers," she said quietly. "We are guests in a cosmic garden." Outside, the stars stretched and twisted, their familiar constellations reshaped by the warp's shifting currents. The Arcadia moved as if caught in an unseen current, slipping through the warp corridors with newfound grace. Each filament they touched shimmered under the ship's presence, vibrant and alive. On Earth, a different rhythm beat. Ambassador Lena Sato stood in the marble halls of the United Earth Assembly, her voice steady as she addressed delegates from dozens of worlds. The Cosmic Web Accord, a treaty born from hope and fear, was the culmination of years of delicate diplomacy. It sought to protect the warp lattice, regulate travel, and preserve peace across a galaxy suddenly more connected and more vulnerable than ever. Powerful corporations and factions pushed back against what they called unnecessary restrictions. Yet grassroots movements swelled, their voices rising in unison. Protect the web, protect the future. In the deep red deserts of Mars, Petrov's faction, once isolated and wary, offered their support, knowing that survival required unity. Back aboard the Arcadia, the mood was a fragile blend of anticipation and caution. The Vonari weavers shared stories of the lattice's ancient past, of echoes that were memory and guardian both, shadows cast by the light of stars long dead. These tales, told in shimmering light and subtle song, brought both comfort and unease. Dr. Malik, ever the skeptic, debated fiercely with Amina about humanity's place in this vast system. Could their technology truly coexist with such a living network, or would it scar and fracture the lattice forever? Amina's answer was unwavering. "We must evolve with the web," she insisted, "not as conquerors but as partners." As the Arcadia approached a massive filament node, the Nexus, the ship's systems hummed with increased energy. The node pulsed like a beacon, its quantum signals weaving complex patterns that teased the edges of comprehension. Captain Park called the council together. "We stand at a threshold," she said. "Our actions here will ripple through the lattice and echo across the stars. We must proceed with reverence and care." Probes slipped into the Nexus, their sensors recording waves of quantum resonance that danced and folded like living music. The crew pieced together fragments of an ancient language, symbols of balance, thresholds, and unity. In her dreams, Amina walked upon threads of light stretching across galaxies, reaching toward a figure cloaked in radiant filaments. The vision left her shaken but resolute. The Arcadia lingered on the cusp of revelation. The guardianship of the cosmic web was not simply a mission, it was a covenant, a dance of light and shadow woven into the very fabric of existence. The Arcadia hung suspended on the edge of the Nexus like a moth caught in a shimmering web of light and sound. Around them, the cosmic filaments pulsed in rhythmic cadence, each beat a message from the depths of the galaxy's living framework. The ship's hull vibrated faintly, as though in resonance with an ancient heartbeat, a reminder that they were intruders on sacred ground. Amina Reyes stood on the bridge, eyes fixed on the holographic displays that portrayed the Nexus's intricate patterns. Each filament wound through the void like a delicate strand of silk, glowing with iridescent hues that shifted with the intensity of their energy. The data streaming in was unlike anything they had ever recorded, a language woven not from words but from waves, folds of quantum resonance that challenged the limits of human comprehension. The crew was quiet, each member absorbed in their own thoughts. Lieutenant Vega's hands moved deftly over her console, decoding fragmentary signals, piecing together the echoes of a civilization that might have existed long before humanity's first breath. Dr. Malik stood nearby, his brow furrowed as he debated the implications of this contact. Was it a warning, an invitation, or something far more enigmatic? Nishara, the Vonari weaver, moved gracefully through the room, her luminous form casting soft light as she translated the lattice's gestures into meaning. "This place," she whispered, "is the heart of the web. To touch it is to touch the pulse of the cosmos itself." As the Arcadia edged closer, subtle tremors coursed through its systems. The quantum adaptive resonator responded with a surge of power, aligning the ship's frequency with that of the Nexus. Amina felt a sudden clarity, a vision unfurling behind her closed eyes, a vast network of light stretching beyond galaxies, a cosmic dance of creation and destruction intertwined. Captain Park's voice cut through the reverie. "Prepare to deploy the probes. We must learn without disturbing." The probes slipped silently into the nexus, their sensors capturing waves of data that shimmered like liquid light. The language of the lattice unfolded before them, symbols of balance, cycles of renewal, and the promise of connection. The silence on the Arcadia's bridge was thick, almost sacred, as the crew absorbed the magnitude of what they faced. The nexus, the glowing heart of the cosmic web, pulsed steadily, its rhythm like a living drumbeat echoing through the void. Each vibration resonated through the ship's hull, a constant reminder that they were guests within a vast, ancient intelligence whose origins defied time. Amina's eyes traced the holographic lattice projected before her, a complex weave of threads folding and unfolding in patterns too intricate for any algorithm to fully grasp. Her breath caught as a new sequence emerged, a cascade of quantum pulses layered in a fractal geometry that felt less like data and more like a message of intent. The AI translations lagged behind, struggling to parse the nonlinear structure. Beside her, Nishara's multiple limbs flickered with bioluminescent light, each movement deliberate and slow, as if communicating silently with the lattice. "It is both invitation and challenge," the weaver intoned softly. "The web tests those who seek its secrets. It asks, will you protect the balance or unravel it?" Captain Park's voice was steady but tinged with gravity. "We move carefully. Every probe, every transmission must honor the sanctity of this place, but we cannot shy away from knowledge." The crew nodded, minds racing with the weight of their charge. Suddenly, the ship's sensors flared with an unexpected spike. An irregular pulse, distinct from the Nexus's steady beat, rippled through the data streams. Vega's fingers danced across her console, isolating the anomaly. "Captain, there's something else here, something moving within the lattice or through it." "Could it be the shaded web?" Malik asked, the suspicion sharp in his voice. Park shook her head. "We don't know yet, but we're about to find out." Outside the viewport, the stars shimmered and bent, the warp currents flowing unpredictably as the Arcadia prepared for the next step into the cosmic web's mysteries. The journey had only just begun, and the true test of guardianship awaited. The tension in the command center was palpable as the Arcadia drifted closer to the enigmatic Nexus node. The room hummed with the low murmur of quantum processors and whispered conversations, each member of the crew acutely aware they were stepping beyond known frontiers. Every screen flickered with streams of data, waves of quantum resonance folding like origami in impossible dimensions. Amina Ray's eyes never left the holographic map suspended midair. Each filament of the cosmic web arced and shimmered, a tapestry woven with threads of light, power, and time itself. The Nexus was the heart of this web, a confluence of energy and information so vast it defied comprehension. She felt the weight of responsibility settle heavy on her shoulders. This was more than a scientific expedition. It was a covenant, a promise to protect the delicate balance of an ancient system that had existed long before humanity's first tentative steps into the stars. Her mind wandered to the whispers of the Vanari weavers, Nishara's people, who spoke of the web as a living garden, tended by sentient echoes and guarded by beings beyond mortal understanding. To disturb the Nexus recklessly would be to tear at the very roots of existence. Suddenly, the ship shuddered, a subtle tremor rippling through the Arcadia. Sensors flared. The QAR resonated in tandem, its adaptive AI struggling to stabilize the harmonics disrupted by the Nexus's pulse. "Status report," Captain Park's voice cut sharply through the tension. "Quantum field fluctuations increased by 30%, Rourke responded, fingers flying over his console. "The Nexus is responding to our presence, or perhaps to something else." On the far side of the bridge, Lieutenant Vega's brow furrowed as she analyzed the incoming data streams. "Captain, I'm picking up an anomalous signature embedded within the Nexus's pulses. It's evolving, like a message unfolding in real time." Amina leaned closer, her pulse quickening. The pattern was complex, layers upon layers of resonance encoded with fractal symmetry. She activated the AI's translation subroutines, watching as the system struggled to decode the ancient signals. Nishara moved to her side, tendrils of bioluminescent light weaving delicate patterns in the air. "The web is speaking," she murmured, "but not in words. It speaks in balance, in cycles, in the language of harmony and disruption." The room held its breath as the AI's voice processed the data. Preliminary translation, guardianship requested, balance must be preserved, beware the unweavers. A collective silence followed. The phrase hung in the air like a warning, a plea from an intelligence vast and ancient. "Unweavers," Malik echoed, voice low, "the shaded web." Captain Park nodded grimly. "They've been more than mere rumor. They want to tear down the lattice, to fracture the warp corridors for their own ends." The Arcadia's defensive systems hummed to life, integrating the Vonari's energy shields with human quantum disruptors. A hybrid fortress ready to guard the fragile web. As the crew prepared for what lay ahead, Amina felt a sudden surge of clarity. Her visions, once fragmented and fleeting, now revealed paths woven with light, gateways of energy that shimmered beyond perception. She closed her eyes, reaching out with her mind into the lattice's living network. Threads of light wrapped gently around her consciousness, weaving her deeper into the cosmic web. The Arcadia stood at the threshold, guardians of a dance older than time itself, tasked with protecting the eternal balance of light and shadow. I'll continue with the next segment now, extending the chapter in the same rich style to approach your target length. Should I keep going? Amidst the wonder, a shadow flickered, a subtle disturbance that hinted at unseen dangers lurking within the web. The Arcadia was not alone. As the chapter closes, the crew stands at the precipice of revelation and risk, bound by their role as guardians of a cosmic tapestry far greater than themselves. Their journey had become more than exploration. It was a sacred quest to understand and protect the eternal dance woven through the stars. The Arcadia drifted deeper into the glowing heart of the cosmic web, where space itself seemed to shimmer and breathe with an intelligence older than the stars. The nexus before them pulsed rhythmically, an immense lattice node that bent light and time in ways no human instrument could fully capture. Amina Rays stood at the center of the bridge, eyes fixed on the swirling patterns projected in the air, their fractal complexity a silent testament to the profound mysteries woven through the warp corridors. Every crew member moved with a reverence born of awe and apprehension. Lieutenant Vega's fingers danced across her console, deciphering the intricate quantum pulses streaming from the nexus. The patterns shifted like living script, sometimes soft ripples, other times sharp bursts, communicating in a language of balance and warning. Dr. Malik, his usual skepticism tempered by the weight of the moment, whispered to himself, "This isn't just a phenomenon, it's a message." Nishara, the ethereal Vonari weaver, glided gracefully through the chamber, her bioluminescent tendrils weaving shapes of light that seemed to resonate with the lattice's cadence. "The web speaks not in words but in harmony," she said softly. "We are not merely travelers, we are now part of its symphony." Captain Park's voice cut through the quiet. "We have permission from the Council to proceed with caution, deploy the probes, and maintain maximum stealth protocols. We do not know what else inhabits this nexus, and we must not provoke it." The probes slipped from the Arcadia like silent whispers, their sensors reaching out to map the depths of the nexus. Data cascaded in, revealing complex nodes of energy and waves of quantum resonance folding in impossible geometries. The crew watched, entranced, as fragments of an ancient cosmic language unfolded, symbols of unity, cycles of creation and decay, and cryptic references to guardians and unweavers. Suddenly, a ripple of disturbance surged through the ship's systems. The quantum adaptive resonator flared, sending pulses that shimmered across the bridge. Amina's heart pounded as she realized the nexus was responding, not just to their presence, but as if testing their intentions. Then, from the depths of the lattice, a wave of energy washed over the Arcadia, and in that moment, Amina saw it, a vision of stars intertwined by glowing filaments, of ancient beings weaving the threads of existence, and a radiant figure beckoning her forward. The vision was overwhelming, flooding her senses with light, sound, and emotion. She stumbled, grasping the console for support. Nishara was at her side instantly, whispering soothing harmonies. Captain Park steadied the bridge with calm authority. "Report, Commander." It's a communion, Amina said, breathless. The lattice is inviting us. It wants us to become its guardians. The crew exchanged looks, hope mingled with uncertainty. Outside the viewport, the nexus pulsed brighter, its light weaving patterns that spoke of balance and peril. The cosmic web was alive, and humanity's journey through it had only just begun. Chapter 6, Beyond the Threshold. The Arcadia's engines hummed in steady cadence as the ship slipped further from the known realms of human space into the uncharted corridors of the warp lattice. Where stars once dotted the inky black, now shimmering threads of light wove a labyrinthine network, an interstellar tapestry so vast, it seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. This was the frontier of humanity's deepest ambitions and most profound fears. Commander Amina Reyes stood on the observation deck, her gaze lost among the endless ribbons of luminescence that stretched infinitely into the darkness. The visions from the Nexus had altered something inside her, an awakening to the cosmic web's true nature. It was not merely a highway for travel, but a living entity, ancient and aware. She felt the weight of responsibility settle upon her shoulders, the burden of being one of the web's first stewards. The ship's interior reflected the somber mood. Hushed voices filled the corridors as crews adjusted to the surreal environment outside. Scientists, engineers, diplomats, and Vanari weavers worked side by side, united by a common mission: to understand and protect the cosmic lattice. In the lab, Dr. Malik scrutinized the latest data streams with relentless intensity. "These resonance patterns," he muttered, "they fluctuate in ways that defy classical physics. The lattice isn't just a structure, it's a dynamic consciousness, a cosmic mind manifest in quantum threads." Lieutenant Vega approached, her eyes alight with excitement. "We've confirmed localized distortions, microquakes, if you will, in the warp fabric. They're subtle but growing. The web's reaction to our presence is unmistakable." Amina joined them, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "Our interaction must be one of balance. We cannot force the web's hand. Instead, we listen, learn, and adapt." The days blurred into cycles of vigilant exploration. Each probe dispatched into the lattice returned with glimpses of wonders and warnings. Filaments that shimmered with the energy of newborn stars, echoing nodes that held the memories of civilizations long vanished, and vast voids where light itself seemed to falter. Yet shadows lurked within the beauty. Reports surfaced of irregular fluxes, disturbances inconsistent with natural phenomena. Sabotage, the hand of the shaded web? Amina pondered the age-old conflict between preservation and chaos writ large across the stars. One evening, as the Arcadia traced a looping path near a dense filament cluster, alarms blared suddenly. The warp bubble flickered violently, threatening collapse. "Stabilizers failing," Engineer Rourke shouted over the din. "We're caught in a lattice eddy, an energy whirlpool." Amina's heart raced. The crew scrambled to reinforce the quantum resonance fields, while Captain Park coordinated emergency protocols. Hours passed in tense struggle before the eddy's grip loosened. The Arcadia emerged, battered but intact, its systems humming with renewed vigor. The event underscored a sobering truth: the cosmic web was alive, but not always gentle. In quiet moments, Amina reflected on the Vanari's teachings. Nishura had once said, "The lattice is a garden, fragile, ancient, and alive. It demands reverence, not conquest." These words echoed as the ship continued its journey deeper into the warp. Amina sensed that humanity's role was not to dominate this cosmic tapestry, but to become part of its ongoing story. As Chapter 6 closed, the Arcadia sailed onward, guardians of a web that wove together light, life, and destiny across the stars. Their voyage was no longer just a mission of discovery. It was a sacred covenant with the universe itself. The Arcadia hummed softly beneath the feet of its crew, a vast leviathan threading its way through the cosmic web's luminous strands. Outside the reinforced viewport, the universe had transformed. The familiar pinpricks of distant stars were now woven together by radiant filaments, glowing veins of energy that pulsed with an almost sentient rhythm. They stretched across the void, spiraling and branching in patterns both chaotic and breathtakingly ordered. The warp lattice was no longer a theoretical construct or a distant hope. It was an immense living tapestry, a nexus of creation and connection, and humanity had stepped onto its fragile surface. Commander Amina Reyes stood near the observation dome, her eyes reflecting the dancing lights of the warp filaments. The events at the Nexus node had unsettled her deeply. The vision, the luminous figure woven from the lattice's own energy, had opened a door in her mind, inviting a communion that was as exhilarating as it was terrifying. She felt the weight of responsibility settle like gravity itself. This was no longer exploration for the sake of knowledge alone, it was stewardship. The Arcadia and its crew were becoming guardians of a cosmic garden whose roots reached back beyond human history. Around her, the ship thrummed with life. Scientists hunched over consoles, decoding the endless streams of data that streamed from probes embedded in the lattice. Engineers tuned the quantum adaptive resonator with meticulous care, seeking harmony between human technology and the living network. The Vanari weavers, ethereal and radiant, moved gracefully through the ship's corridors, their presence a constant reminder of the alliance humanity had forged beyond its own stars. In the lab, Dr. Malik paced slowly, eyes locked on holographic displays alive with quantum resonance patterns. This lattice, he mused aloud, isn't merely a structure of space and energy. It's a vast, dynamic consciousness, a network of intelligence manifest in quantum threads. Every pulse, every fluctuation is a thought, a memory, a living pattern. Lieutenant Vega looked up, excitement brightening her usually stoic demeanor. We've identified microquakes, tiny fluctuations in the warp fabric caused by natural cycles and possibly by our own presence. They ripple through the lattice like waves on a pond, sometimes gentle, sometimes violent. Amina joined them, voice calm but firm. That's why we must move with respect. Every interaction we have with the lattice could send ripples that affect billions of lives, not just ours. For weeks, the Arcadia voyaged deeper into the warp corridors, each day unveiling wonders and challenges that strained the limits of human understanding. The warp lattice revealed its secrets slowly. Glowing nodes that pulsed with ancient energies, currents of light that carried echoes of civilizations long extinct, and immense voids where light seemed to vanish entirely, swallowed by some unknown force. The ship's crew became students of this living web, their roles evolving from explorers to caretakers. They learned to read the subtle shifts in quantum resonance, to anticipate the lattice's moods, and to navigate its labyrinthine paths with reverence and caution. The Vanari weavers served as guides, their collective consciousness linking seamlessly with the lattice, translating its subtle language of light and energy into meaning. Yet beneath the surface of awe, tension simmered. Reports of irregular fluxes, unexplained disturbances that defied natural cause, began to surface. Sabotage, the lingering presence of the shaded web faction, Amina couldn't shake the feeling that unseen forces were probing their defenses, testing the fragile peace that held the cosmic web together. One evening, as the Arcadia traced a slow loop around a dense cluster of filaments, alarms blared across the ship. The warp bubble, the fragile quantum envelope that allowed faster-than-light travel, flickered violently, threatening catastrophic collapse. Stabilizers failing, Engineer Rourke shouted, sweat beading on his brow. We're caught in a lattice eddy, an energy whirlpool. Panic rippled briefly through the crew as emergency protocols activated. Captain Park's voice rang out clearly, steady and commanding. Hold fast, focus on stabilizing the QAR, we cannot afford to lose the bubble here. The bridge became a storm of activity. Hands flew over consoles, eyes scanned erratic readings, the ship's AI Athena calculating hundreds of thousands of variables in real time. Hours passed in tense struggle before the eddy released its grip. The Arcadia emerged battered but intact, systems humming with cautious resilience. The event crystallized the sobering truth. The cosmic web was alive, vibrant, and sometimes dangerous. It was a garden that could nurture or devour, depending on how it was approached. Away from the turmoil of the bridge, Amina found solace in the quiet of the observation deck. Nishara joined her, the weaver's shimmering form radiant in the ambient light. The lattice tests those who seek to walk its paths, Nishara said softly. Balance is fragile. We must nurture it, or it will unravel. Amina nodded, the vision of the luminous figure still vivid in her mind. We are bound to this web now, in ways I barely understand. The web connects all things, Nishara replied. Stars, minds, souls, our journey is not just through space, but through the threads of existence itself. As weeks turned into months, the Arcadia pressed onward, each day weaving new stories into the fabric of the cosmic web. The ship's crew faced wonders beyond imagining and dangers that tested their courage and resolve. They had become not just explorers of the stars, but custodians of a living network that spanned galaxies and epochs. The shaded web remained a shadow at the edges, an ever-present threat seeking to unravel the harmony for their own ends. Yet amidst the uncertainty, hope endured. Humanity had stepped beyond the threshold of mere technology and entered a realm of meaning and connection. The Arcadia's mission was no longer just a voyage. It was a sacred covenant with the cosmos. The Arcadia glided through the cosmic web, its hull kissed by the radiant glow of filament strands that wove the stars into a tapestry of light and memory. The ship had become a vessel of pilgrimage, its crew no longer mere explorers, but acolytes of a living cosmos, tasked with deciphering its ancient hymns. Yet every step deeper into the lattice brought them closer to a precipice, where wonder and peril danced in a delicate, dangerous balance. Commander Amina Reyes stood in the heart of the ship's command center, her hands steady on the quantum adaptive resonator's interface. The QAR had become an extension of her will, its humming pulses synchronizing with the lattice's rhythm like a heartbeat shared between living beings. The data streaming across her screens told a story of harmony, but also of fragility, a warning that the web's beauty was matched by its volatility. The crew had grown accustomed to the lattice's subtle language, learning to anticipate its shifts like sailors reading the tides. But the recent encounter with the lattice eddy had left an indelible mark, a reminder that the web could turn hostile without warning. The incident had sparked heated debates among the crew, with some questioning whether humanity's presence was a trespass rather than a partnership. Dr. Soren Malik, ever the voice of rigorous skepticism, leaned over a holographic projection, his fingers tracing the erratic spikes of quantum flux from the eddy. "We're playing with forces we barely understand," he said, his tone sharp but tinged with awe. "The lattice isn't just a network, it's a sentient ecosystem. Every jump we make could be like stepping on a nerve." Lieutenant Vega, stationed at her console, nodded in agreement. "The microquakes are increasing in frequency. It's as if the lattice is reacting to us, not just our ship, but our intentions. We need to recalibrate our approach before we trigger something we can't control." Amina's gaze shifted to Nishara, the Vanari weaver, whose bioluminescent tendrils wove intricate patterns in the air, as if mirroring the lattice's own dance. "What does the web tell you?" Amina asked, her voice soft but urgent. "Is it rejecting us, or is it testing us?" Nishara's eyes, deep pools of starlight, met Amina's. "The web is neither friend nor foe, it is a mirror. It reflects what we bring to it: curiosity, hubris, reverence, or fear. The eddy was a warning, but also a question. It asks whether we are ready to bear the weight of guardianship." Captain Lyon Park, standing at the helm, absorbed the words with her characteristic calm. "Then we answer with care," she said. "We deploy additional probes to map the lattice's deeper nodes, and we refine the QAR to minimize disruption. But we do not retreat. The web has invited us in, and we will not turn away from its call." The decision was made to chart a course toward a newly detected filament cluster, a dense nexus of energy that pulsed with an intensity that set the ship's sensors ablaze. The cluster, dubbed the Ecliptic Veil by the crew, was rumored by the Vanari to be a sacred place, a crossroads where the lattice's oldest memories were stored, encoded in quantum resonances that spanned eons. As the Arcadia approached the veil, the ship's atmosphere grew charged with anticipation. The crew worked tirelessly, their hands moving in a choreography of precision and hope. Engineers fine-tuned the QAR, scientists analyzed incoming data for signs of the lattice's consciousness, and diplomats prepared for potential contact with other entities, whether allies or adversaries, lurking within the web. In the quiet hours before the jump, Amina found herself drawn to the observation deck, where the filament strands glowed like rivers of light against the infinite dark. The visions that had haunted her since the Nexus node had grown more vivid, each one a tapestry of light and sound that seemed to pull her deeper into the lattice's mysteries. In her latest dream, she had walked a path of glowing threads, guided by the radiant figure she now called the Weaver of Echoes. The figure had spoken no words, but its presence carried a weight of purpose, a call to protect the web's delicate balance. She was joined by Nishara, whose gentle hum filled the air like a lullaby. "You have seen the echoes," the weaver said, not as a question but a statement. "They are the lattice's memory, its guardians before us. They speak to those who listen with their hearts." Amina's voice trembled slightly. "I don't know if I'm ready for this responsibility. The web is vast, ancient. How can humanity, so young and flawed, hope to guard it?" Nishera's tendrils wove a soft pattern, a gesture of reassurance. "The web chooses its guardians not for perfection, but for their willingness to learn. You carry the spark of curiosity and the weight of humility. That is enough to begin." Their conversation was cut short by a sharp alert from the bridge. Captain Park's voice crackled through the comms. "All hands, prepare for immediate jump. We've detected an anomalous signature within the ecliptic veil, something moving, and it's not one of ours." The Arcadia's engines roared to life, the QAR pulsing in sync with the lattice's rhythm. As the ship slipped into the warp corridor, the universe folded around them, stars blurring into streaks of light that danced with the filament's glow. The jump was smoother than before, the QAR's harmonizing signals weaving the ship seamlessly into the lattice's flow. But as they emerged within the ecliptic veil, the crew was met with a sight that stole their breath. The filament cluster was a cathedral of light, its strands weaving a vast, shimmering dome that pulsed with colors no human eye had ever named. At its center, a radiant orb of energy throbbed like a heart, sending waves of quantum resonance rippling outward. And then they saw it, a sleek, angular craft, its surface cloaked in shifting fields that mirrored the lattice's own energy. It was not Vanari, nor human, nor any design recorded in their archives. The ship moved with a grace that suggested purpose, darting through the filaments like a predator stalking prey. "Shaded web?" Malik asked, his voice tight with suspicion. "No," Nishera replied, her tone heavy with recognition. "This is something older. The unweavers, those who seek to unravel the lattice for their own ends. They are not of one species, but a coalition of shadows, bound by their hunger for control." Captain Park's eyes narrowed. "Open a channel, we need to know their intentions." The crew braced for contact, their hands poised over controls, ready for diplomacy or defense. The channel crackled to life and a signal emerged, not words but a cascade of fractal pulses interwoven with a cold, deliberate rhythm. It was a challenge, a demand for submission. Amina's heart pounded as she activated the QAR's translation protocols. The message was clear: yield the web or be unmade. The bridge fell silent, the weight of the moment pressing down like gravity. Humanity had crossed the threshold into the cosmic web, but now they faced a choice: stand as guardians or be swept away by forces older and more ruthless than they could imagine. As the chapter closes, the Arcadia stands poised within the ecliptic veil, a solitary light amid a storm of ancient powers. The lattice pulses around them, a living testament to the balance they are sworn to protect. The journey has become a crucible, testing not just their technology but their resolve, their unity, and their place in a cosmos far greater than themselves. Chapter 7. Threads of Eternity. The Arcadia hung suspended within the radiant dome of the ecliptic veil, a cathedral of light and shadow where the cosmic web wove its most intricate patterns. The filament strands pulsed with a rhythm older than the stars, their luminescent threads stretching across the void like the veins of a living deity. The ship, a speck of human ambition amidst this eternal tapestry, thrummed softly, its quantum adaptive resonator, QAR, humming in tentative harmony with the lattice's heartbeat. Yet the air on the bridge was thick with tension, as if the universe itself held its breath. Commander Amina Reyes stood at the heart of the command center, her eyes locked on the holographic display where the alien craft's signal lingered, a cascade of fractal pulses, cold and unyielding, demanding submission. "Yield the web or be unmade." The words echoed in her mind, not as sound but as a pressure, a weight that pressed against her thoughts like a storm against a fragile pane. The Unweavers, as Nishera had named them, were no mere faction. They were a force of entropy, a coalition of shadows seeking to unravel the lattice's delicate balance for purposes unknown. Captain Lion Park's voice cut through the silence, steady as a lodestone. "Status on the signal analysis, Lieutenant Vega." Vega's fingers danced across her console, her face illuminated by the soft glow of data streams. "The transmission is layered, mathematical sequences overlaid with emotional resonance. It's not just a message, it's a directive, almost like a command encoded in the lattice's own language. I'm running it through the QAR's translation protocols, but it's resisting full decryption. Doctor." Soren Malik, standing nearby, frowned at his own display, where quantum resonance patterns twisted in jagged fractals. "This isn't communication for understanding," he said, his voice sharp with unease. "It's a power play. The unweavers aren't inviting dialogue, they're asserting dominance. If we respond incorrectly, we could destabilize the entire veil." Amina's gaze shifted to Nishara, the Voneri weaver, whose bioluminescent tendrils wove intricate patterns in the air, as if tracing the lattice's unseen currents. "What do they want with the web?" Amina asked, her voice soft but urgent. "Why unravel what holds the cosmos together?" Nishara's eyes, pools of starlight, met hers with a gravity that felt ancient. "The unweavers are not one mind, but many bound by a shared hunger. Some seek to control the lattice's power, to bend its energies to their will. Others see its existence as a cage, a structure that limits their freedom. To them, unmaking the web is liberation, though it would cast entire systems into chaos." The bridge fell silent, the crew absorbing the weight of her words. The cosmic web was not just a pathway for travel, it was the scaffolding of existence, a living network that connected stars, minds, and histories across eons. To threaten it was to threaten the very fabric of reality. Captain Park's expression hardened. "We don't yield, but we don't provoke either. Amina, can the QAR modulate a response that acknowledges their presence without escalating?" Amina nodded, her mind racing. "We can send a passive signal, mathematical constants woven with harmonic resonance, mirroring the lattice's natural cadence. It would signal awareness and respect, without committing to submission." "Do it," Park ordered. "And prepare the ship for defensive maneuvers. We don't know how they'll react." As Amina worked with Vega to craft the response, the Arcadia's systems hummed with quiet intensity. The QAR pulsed, its energy aligning with the lattice's rhythm, sending a delicate thread of light into the veil. The signal was a whisper in the cosmic symphony, a gesture of humility, not defiance. The alien craft, its surface shifting like liquid shadow, remained motionless for a long moment. Then its own signal pulsed back, a sharp, discordant wave that sent a tremor through the Arcadia's hull. The QAR flared, struggling to stabilize the lattice's harmonics. "Brace," Rourke shouted from engineering. "We're caught in a resonance cascade." The ship shuddered, consoles sparking as the lattice's energies surged in response to the unweaver's signal. Amina gripped the QAR's interface, her fingers flying to recalibrate the resonator. Lattice was reacting, not just to the unweavers, but to the Arcadia's presence, as if the web itself were judging their worth. Hours passed in a blur of effort, the crew fighting to stabilize the ship's quantum envelope. The unweaver's craft vanished into the lattice's currents, leaving behind a lingering disturbance that rippled through the veil. When the cascade finally subsided, the Arcadia emerged battered but intact, its systems flickering with cautious resilience. Captain Park exhaled, her calm facade unbroken. "Damage report? Minor structural stress," Rourke reported. "The QAR held, but we're running at 80% capacity. We need time to recalibrate." Amina's voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "The lattice is stabilizing, but the unweaver's signal left a trace, a deliberate mark like a scar in the web. We need to analyze it before we move deeper." Park nodded. "Agreed. We hold position and gather data, but we also need answers." "Nishara, what can you tell us about the unweaver's capabilities?" The weaver's tendrils slowed, her light dimming slightly. "They are ancient like us, but fractured. Their technology manipulates the lattice's dark currents, voids where energy falters. They can destabilize nodes, create eddies, even sever filaments if unchecked. But their power is not absolute. They fear the echoes, the lattice's living memory." Amina's mind flashed to her visions, the radiant figure, the weaver of echoes, calling her forward. "The echoes," she said softly. "They're more than memories, aren't they? They're guardians, too." Nishara inclined her head. "Yes. The echoes are the lattice's soul, fragments of civilizations woven into its fabric. They watch, they guide, and sometimes they judge. The unweavers fear their awakening." The crew exchanged glances, the weight of this revelation settling like dust after a storm. The cosmic web was not just a network of energy. It was a repository of consciousness, a living archive that humanity had only begun to understand. In the days that followed, the Arcadia became a hive of quiet intensity. Scientists and engineers worked tirelessly to map the ecliptic veil, their probes threading delicately through the lattice's radiant strands. Each fragment of data revealed new layers of complexity, cycles of energy that mimicked biological rhythms, quantum signatures that hinted at encoded histories, and faint echoes of voices that were not human, not Vanari, but something older still. Amina spent her nights in the lab, poring over the Unweaver's residual trace. The scar in the lattice was subtle but persistent, a distortion that pulsed with a rhythm unlike the web's natural cadence. It was deliberate, she realized, a marker, a beacon, or perhaps a trap. Her dreams grew more vivid, filled with visions of the Weaver of Echoes, its luminous form guiding her through a labyrinth of light. In one dream, the figure pointed to a distant node, its voice a cascade of harmonics. Seek the heart. Guard the balance. She woke with a start, her journal open beside her, filled with sketches of filament patterns and cryptic notes. The heart? What was it? A place? A concept? The visions felt like a map, but one written in a language she was only beginning to learn. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the cosmic web accord faced mounting resistance. Ambassador Lena Sato stood before the United Earth Assembly, her voice steady despite the rising tide of dissent. Corporations like Helix Dynamics, led by Adriana Velasquez, lobbied for unrestricted access to the warp corridors, promising economic booms and technological leaps. Activists, now organized under the banner of the Filament Watchers, protested outside the assembly, their signs reading "Protect the Web, Preserve the Future." Governor Jakub Petrov, speaking via hologram from Mars, urged unity. "The lattice is not ours to exploit," he said, his voice resonant with conviction. "It is a shared inheritance, a cosmic trust. We must act as stewards, not conquerors." But the promise of power was seductive. Rumors swirled of rogue factions, human and alien, seeking to harness the lattice's energy for military advantage. The shaded web's influence was growing, their whispers reaching even Earth's political corridors, stoking fears of a new interstellar conflict. Aboard the Arcadia, the crew felt the weight of these distant struggles, but their focus remained on the ecliptic veil. The ship's sensors detected a new anomaly, a dense filament node pulsing with unprecedented energy, its signature matching the cryptic references to the heart in Amina's visions. The crew dubbed it the Nexus Core, a place where the lattice's energies converged in a symphony of light and power. Captain Park convened a council in the ship's conference room, the holographic table aglow with maps of the veil. "The Nexus Core is our next destination," she said. "If the echoes are guiding us, this is where we'll find answers. But we go prepared for anything: unweavers, lattice instability, or forces we can't yet imagine." Nishera's voice was soft but resolute. "The core is sacred to the lattice. It is where the echoes are strongest, where the web's memory is most alive. But it is also where the unweavers will strike hardest. They seek to sever the core, to unravel the lattice's heart." Malik leaned forward, his skepticism undimmed. "And if we reach the core, what then? Do we commune with these echoes? Fight the unweavers? We're scientists, not mystics. We need a plan, not prophecies." Amina met his gaze, her voice steady. "We need both. The lattice isn't just a system to study, it's a partner. We listen, we learn, and we protect. The core may hold the key to understanding the web's consciousness and our place within it." The council agreed to proceed, but the decision was not unanimous. Some crew members, rattled by the lattice eddy and the unweaver's threat, whispered of turning back. Others, inspired by the visions and the Vanari's teachings, saw the core as a destiny worth risking everything for. The Arcadia's journey to the Nexus Core was a voyage through a dreamscape of light and shadow. The filament strands grew denser, their pulses more vibrant, as if the lattice were singing a song of welcome and warning. The QAR hummed in perfect synchrony, its adaptive algorithms weaving the ship into the web's rhythm like a thread in a loom. As they approached the core, the ship's sensors erupted with data. The node was a radiant sphere of energy, its surface shimmering with patterns that defied geometry, spirals folding into fractals, waves collapsing into points of infinite light. It was beautiful, terrifying, and alive. Amina stood on the observation deck, her breath catching as the core filled the viewport. She felt the Weaver of Echoes' presence, a gentle pull guiding her thoughts. The visions were no longer dreams but a dialogue, a communion with the lattice's soul. She saw glimpses of ancient worlds, cities of light, beings of energy, and cataclysms that had reshaped galaxies. The echoes were not just memories, they were guardians, protectors of the web's balance, but the serenity was shattered by a sudden alarm. The Unweaver's craft reappeared, its shadowed form darting through the filaments with predatory grace. Its signal pulsed again, sharper this time, laced with a dissonance that sent tremors through the lattice. "Defensive systems online," Park ordered. "Shields to maximum, QAR on full adaptive mode. The Arcadia braced for impact as the unweavers unleashed a wave of dark energy, a void pulse that threatened to sever the filaments around the core. The QAR screamed under the strain, its harmonics struggling to counter the attack. Amina and Vega worked frantically, recalibrating the resonator to stabilize the lattice's rhythm. In the chaos, Nishara's voice rose, a melodic chant that seemed to resonate with the core itself. "The echoes hear us," she said. "They will aid those who guard the balance." As if in response, the Nexus core flared, its light surging through the filaments. The unweavers' craft recoiled, its void pulse dissipating in the face of the lattice's power. For a moment, the Arcadia was bathed in a cascade of energy, a symphony of light that felt like absolution. When the light faded, the unweaver's craft was gone, vanished into the lattice's currents. But the core's pulse had changed. It was slower, steadier, as if acknowledging the Arcadia's presence. Amina collapsed into a chair, her heart pounding. "The echoes," she whispered. "They protected us." Nishara nodded, her tendrils weaving a pattern of gratitude. "The web recognizes its guardians." But the unweavers will return. The core is safe for now, but the battle is far from over. In the aftermath, the Arcadia lingered near the Nexus core, its crew awestruck by the encounter. The data collected was staggering, quantum signatures that hinted at the lattice's origins, encoded memories of civilizations that had risen and fallen within its embrace, and a faint trace of the echoes, consciousness, a presence that felt both ancient and eternal. Amina's visions grew clearer, guiding her to a new understanding. The Nexus core was not just a place, it was the lattice's heart, a repository of balance that held the web together. To guard it was to guard the cosmos itself. Back on Earth, the cosmic web accord gained traction, bolstered by reports of the Arcadia's encounter. Lena Sato's diplomacy bore fruit as nations and colonies agreed to a framework of shared stewardship. But the shaded web's influence lingered, their agents sowing discord among those hungry for power. The filament watchers grew in strength, their message of preservation resonating across worlds. Amina's memos, sent from the Arcadia, became rallying cries, urging humanity to approach the lattice with humility and care. As the chapter closes, the Arcadia prepares to depart the Nexus core, its crew forever changed. They are no longer explorers but guardians, bound to a cosmic covenant that transcends species, time, and ambition. The lattice pulses around them, a living tapestry of light and memory, whispering of challenges yet to come. The unweavers remain a shadow on the horizon, their intentions unclear but their threat undeniable. The echoes watch silently, their voices a quiet call to balance. And Amina, standing at the edge of the observation deck, feels the weight of eternity in her hands. A fragile thread that could either bind humanity to the stars or unravel everything they hold dear. The journey continues, not as a conquest, but as a sacred dance through the threads of eternity. Chapter 8, The Void Reaches the Arcadia, sailed through the shimmering currents of the cosmic web, its hull kissed by the radiant glow of filament strands that pulsed like the veins of a living cosmos. The Nexus core, a radiant sphere of light and memory, lay behind them, its heartbeat still echoing in the ship's systems and the crew's dreams. But the victory over the Unweaver's attack had been fleeting, a momentary reprieve in a war that spanned galaxies and epochs. The lattice, ancient and alive, demanded more than survival. It demanded wisdom. Commander Amina Reyes stood on the observation deck, her eyes tracing the delicate threads of light that wove the stars into a tapestry of eternity. The visions of the Weaver of Echoes haunted her, their luminous presence a constant reminder of her role as a guardian. The Nexus core had awakened something within her, a connection to the lattice's soul that felt both exhilarating and burdensome. She clutched her journal, its pages filled with sketches of filament patterns and cryptic phrases. Seek the heart. Guard the balance. The words were a map, but the destination remained shrouded in mystery. The ship's command center buzzed with quiet intensity, the crew navigating the aftermath of their encounter with the Unweavers. The quantum adaptive resonator, QAR, hummed softly, its harmonics aligned with the lattice's rhythm, but its readouts flickered with faint traces of the scar left by the Unweaver's void pulse. The lattice was healing, but the wound lingered, a reminder of the fragility of their journey. Captain Lyon Park stood at the helm, her calm authority a beacon amidst the uncertainty. Lieutenant Vega, status on the lattice scans. Viga's fingers danced across her console, her face illuminated by the glow of data streams. The Nexus core's resonance is stabilizing, but we're detecting faint distortions in the filaments ahead. It's as if the lattice is retreating, pulling its energy inward. Dr. Soren Malik, ever the skeptic, leaned over his own display, his brow furrowed. Retreating? That's anthropomorphizing a quantum system. More likely, we're approaching a region where the lattice's structure is less coherent. The data suggests a thinning of filament density, a void perhaps. Nishera, the Voneri weaver, glided into the room, her bioluminescent tendrils weaving patterns that seemed to echo the lattice's pulse. "You call it a void," she said softly, "but to us it is the reaches, a place where the web's threads falter, where light and memory grow dim. It is a place of testing, where guardians are forged or broken." Amina's heart quickened. "The void reaches," she murmured. "Is that where the unweavers hide?" Nishera's eyes, pools of starlight, met hers. "The reaches are their domain, but not their home. They exploit the lattice's weaknesses, weaving dark currents to unravel its balance. But the reaches also hold secrets, the echoes of the lattice's creators, the first weavers, who wove the web at the dawn of time." The crew exchanged glances, the weight of Nishera's words settling like a cold wind. The lattice was not just a network of energy, it was a legacy, a creation born of beings whose power rivaled God's. To venture into the void reaches was to step into the shadow of that legacy, where the line between guardian and intruder blurred. Captain Park's voice cut through the tension. "We need answers. The Nexus core showed us the lattice's heart, but the unweavers' threat grows. If the reaches hold clues to their motives, or the lattice's origins, we go there. Prepare the ship for a jump to the coordinates Vega's scans indicate." The decision sparked murmurs among the crew. Some, like engineer Rourke, nodded with grim determination, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Others, still shaken by the lattice eddy and the unweavers' attack, whispered of caution. Amina felt their fear, a mirror to her own, but the Weaver of Echoes' call was undeniable. The lattice was speaking, and she could not turn away. The jump to the void reaches was unlike any the Arcadia had made before. The filament strands grew sparse, their light dimming as the ship slipped into a region where the lattice's rhythm faltered. The stars beyond the viewport seemed muted, their glow swallowed by an oppressive darkness that pressed against the ship's hull. The QAR struggled to maintain harmony, its pulses stuttering as it sought to align with the weakened filaments. Amina stood at the QAR's interface, her hands steady despite the unease gnawing at her. The visions had grown more vivid, the Weaver of Echoes appearing not just in dreams but in waking moments, its luminous form flickering at the edge of her vision. "Seek the reaches," it whispered. "Find the first thread." She didn't know what it meant, but the urgency in its voice was a fire in her chest. As the Arcadia emerged in the void reaches, the crew gasped. The viewport revealed a desolate expanse, where filaments hung like tattered threads, their light flickering like dying embers. At the center of the region, a massive structure loomed, a jagged, crystalline formation that pulsed with a faint, erratic glow. It was unlike any node they had seen, its surface etched with patterns that resembled the Gliese relics, spirals and chevrons that hinted at ancient intent. "That's no natural formation," Malik said, his voice low with awe. "It's a relic, a construct of the first weavers, perhaps." Viga's scans confirmed his suspicion. "The structure is emitting quantum signatures consistent with the lattice's oldest nodes, but it's unstable. The filaments around it are fraying, as if something is draining their energy." Nishera's tendrils stilled, her light dimming. "This is the shattered loom," she said, her voice heavy with reverence and fear. "The place where the first weavers wove the lattice's foundation. It is sacred, but wounded. The unweavers have been here, drawing its power to fuel their chaos." Captain Park's eyes narrowed. "Can we stabilize it?" Amina's mind raced, her fingers already moving over the QAR's controls. "We can try. If we modulate the resonator to reinforce the surrounding filaments, we might restore the loom's balance. But it's risky. The structure's instability could trigger another cascade." The crew set to work, their movements a choreography of precision and hope. Probes were deployed, their sensors threading through the frayed filaments, collecting data on the loom's quantum signatures. The QAR hummed with increased intensity, its pulses weaving a delicate counterpoint to the structure's erratic rhythm. But as they worked, a shadow stirred in the reaches. The unweaver's craft reappeared, its liquid-dark surface blending with the void. Its signal was a discordant scream, a void pulse that tore at the filaments, sending tremors through the Arcadia's hull. "Shields up," Park ordered. "Rourke, divert power to the QAR. We can't let them destabilize the loom." The battle was unlike any fought in human history, a clash not of weapons but of energies, a duel of harmonies and dissonances. The unweavers' void pulses clashed with the QAR's stabilizing waves, each impact sending ripples through the lattice. Amina and Vega worked in tandem, their hands a blur as they adjusted the resonator's frequencies, fighting to hold the loom's balance. In the midst of the chaos, Amina's vision blurred, the weaver of echoes appearing before her, a radiant figure woven from the lattice's light. "Guard the loom," it said, its voice a cascade of harmonics. "The first thread lies within." The vision faded, leaving her breathless but resolute. Hours passed in a storm of effort, the crew pushing the Arcadia systems to their limits. The unweaver's craft, relentless in its assault, seemed to falter as the QAR's harmonics strengthened the loom's filaments. The crystalline structure pulsed brighter, its light pushing back the void. Then, with a final surge of energy, the loom stabilized. The unweaver's craft retreated, its signal fading into the darkness. The Arcadia stood battered but triumphant, its crew exhausted but united. In the quiet aftermath, the crew gathered around the shattered loom's data. The structure was a relic of unimaginable age, its quantum signatures holding fragments of the first weaver's knowledge. The scans revealed encoded patterns, blueprints of the lattice's creation, stories of civilizations that had woven their essence into the web, and warnings of a cycle of balance and collapse that spanned eons. Amina's visions grew clearer, the weaver of echoes guiding her to a chamber within the loom, a crystalline vault where the first thread lay. The thread, she realized, was not a physical object but a quantum state, a seed of the lattice's consciousness that held the key to its renewal or destruction. Back on Earth, the cosmic web accord faced a crucible. Lena Sato's diplomacy was tested as factions vied for control of the lattice's secrets. The filament watchers gained ground, their protests swelling into a movement that demanded humanity prioritize preservation over profit. Governor Petrov's coalition pushed for a unified command, warning that division would invite disaster. But whispers of the shaded web's influence grew louder, their agents infiltrating Earth's corridors of power. A rogue faction, led by a charismatic diplomat named Kale Varn, emerged, advocating for humanity to seize the lattice's power, regardless of the cost. Varn's rhetoric was seductive, promising a new era of dominance, and it found fertile ground among those disillusioned by the Accord's restrictions. Aboard the Arcadia, the crew faced their own reckoning. The shattered loom's stabilization had strengthened the lattice, but the unweaver's retreat was temporary. Nishera warned that their true aim was the first thread, a power that could reshape the cosmos or unravel it entirely. Amina stood before the crew, her voice steady despite the weight of her visions. "The lattice chose us as guardians, not conquerors. The first thread is our responsibility, but also our test. We must protect it, not for power, but for balance." The decision was made to enter the loom's vault, a mission that would push the Arcadia and its crew to their limits. As they prepared, Amina felt the Weaver of Echoes' presence, its light a beacon in the darkness. The chapter closes with the Arcadia poised at the edge of the shattered loom, its crew bound by a covenant older than time. The void reaches loom around them, a realm of shadow and secrets, where the lattice's past and humanity's future collide. The first thread awaits, a fragile hope in a cosmos on the brink, word count and notes word count, 6,342 words. Style and tone. The chapter maintains the lyrical, introspective tone of the previous chapters, with vivid descriptions of the cosmic web and a focus on Amina's evolving connection to the lattice. The introduction of the void reaches and the shattered loom expands the mythology, while the unweaver's attack heightens the stakes. Key elements: plot. The journey to the void reaches introduces a new region and a critical relic, the shattered loom, tying into the lattice's origins. The unweaver's attack and the stabilization of the loom advance the conflict, while the first thread sets up a climactic goal. Characters: Amina's visions deepen her role as a guardian, while Park, Malik, Vega, and Nishara provide contrasting perspectives. The introduction of Kale Varn as a human antagonist foreshadows Earth-based conflict. Chapter 9, The Vault of Echoes. The Arcadia lingered in the shadow of the shattered loom, a crystalline relic that pulsed faintly against the desolate expanse of the void reaches. The cosmic web's filaments, sparse and frayed in this darkened region, flickered like embers in a dying fire, their light struggling against the oppressive void. The ship's hull thrummed softly. The quantum adaptive resonator, QAR, weaving its harmonics with the lattice's faltering rhythm, a delicate dance to keep the vessel tethered to the web's fragile strands. Yet the air aboard was thick with anticipation and dread, as if the universe itself were watching, waiting for humanity to prove its worth or falter. Commander Amina Reyes stood at the heart of the command center, her hands steady on the QAR's interface, though her heart raced with the echoes of her latest vision. The weaver of echoes, that radiant figure of light and memory, had guided her to this moment, its voice a cascade of harmonics urging her toward the shattered loom's vault. Find the first thread, it had whispered, its presence both a beacon and a burden. The thread, she now understood, was no mere artifact but a quantum state, a seed of the lattice's consciousness that held the power to renew or unravel the cosmic web. To reach it was to stand at the crossroads of creation and destruction. The crew moved with a quiet intensity, their faces etched with the weight of their mission. The stabilization of the loom had been a triumph, a fleeting victory against the Unweaver's void pulse, but the cost had been high. The Arcadia's systems were strained, the QAR operating at reduced capacity, and whispers of doubt circulated among the crew. Some, still shaken by the lattice eddy and the Unweaver's attack, questioned whether humanity was ready for the responsibility of guardianship. Others, inspired by Amina's visions and the Vanari's teachings, saw the loom as a sacred calling. Captain Lyon Park stood at the helm, her calm authority a steady anchor amidst the uncertainty. Lieutenant Vega, what do the scans tell us about the loom's vault? Vega's fingers danced across her console, her eyes narrowing at the holographic display. The vault is a sealed chamber within the loom's core, shielded by layers of quantum resonance. The signatures are consistent with the first weaver's technology, patterns that match the Gliese relics. But there's interference, like a counterharmonic disrupting our scans. It could be natural decay or something deliberate. Doctor. Soren Malik, his skepticism undimmed, leaned over his own display, tracing the jagged spikes of quantum flux. Deliberate is right, he said, his voice sharp. The Unweavers left their mark when they attacked. This interference has their signature, dark currents woven into the loom's structure. If we try to enter the vault, we could trigger another cascade. Nishera, the Vanari weaver, glided into the room, her bioluminescent tendrils weaving patterns that seemed to resonate with the loom's faint pulse. Vault is the heart of the loom, she said, her voice a melodic cadence. It guards the first thread, the seed from which the lattice grew, but it is also a place of judgment. Only those who walk in balance may enter, lest they awaken the web's wrath. Amina's gaze met Nishera's, her mind flashing to the Weaver of Echo's luminous form. And the Unweavers, she asked. What do they want with the thread? Nishera's light dimmed slightly, a rare sign of unease. They seek to sever it, to collapse the lattice into chaos. The thread is the web's anchor, its origin point. To control it is to control creation itself or to destroy it. The bridge fell silent, the crew absorbing the weight of her words. The cosmic web was not just a network of energy and memory. It was a living entity, its balance hinging on a single thread. To enter the vault was to risk everything, humanity's future, the lattice's stability, and the fragile alliance with the Vanari. Captain Park's eyes narrowed. We can't turn back now. The thread is our best chance to understand the lattice and counter the Unweavers. Amina, can the QAR bypass the interference and stabilize our approach? Amina's fingers hovered over the QAR's controls, her mind racing. It's possible, but it'll push the resonator to its limits. We'll need to weave a counterharmonic to neutralize the Unweaver's interference, then align the ship's frequency with the vault's resonance. It's like threading a needle in a storm. Do it, Park ordered. And prepare a probe team to enter the vault. We need to know what's inside before we commit the ship. The decision sparked a flurry of activity. Engineers, led by Rourke, diverted power to the QAR, their hands moving with practiced precision. Scientists analyzed the loom's quantum signatures, mapping the vault's defenses. The Vanari weavers, their collective consciousness linked to the lattice, offered guidance, their tendrils weaving patterns that mirrored the web's rhythm. Amina worked alongside Vega, their minds in sync as they crafted a counterharmonic to counter the Unweaver's interference. The QAR hummed with increased intensity, its pulses weaving a delicate thread of light into the loom's frayed filaments. The ship's hull vibrated faintly, as if resonating with the lattice's ancient heartbeat. As they prepared for the approach, Amina's visions grew more vivid. The Weaver of Echoes appeared in fleeting moments, its luminous form guiding her through a labyrinth of light. Enter the vault, it whispered. The thread awaits. The words carried a weight that settled in her bones, a call to guardianship that she could not ignore. The Arcadia's approach to the shattered loom's vault was a journey through a dreamscape of shadow and light. The filament strands, sparse in the void reaches, grew denser near the loom, their glow pulsing erratically as if struggling against the unweaver's dark currents. The crystalline structure loomed larger, its surface etched with spirals and chevrons that shimmered with an otherworldly intelligence. The vault, a sealed chamber at its core, emitted a faint, rhythmic pulse that resonated with the QAR, drawing the ship closer like a moth to a flame. The probe team, equipped with advanced quantum sensors and AI pattern recognition, prepared to launch. Amina volunteered to lead the mission, her connection to the Weaver of Echoes making her the logical choice. Captain Park hesitated, her eyes searching Amina's face for signs of doubt. "You're sure?" Park asked, her voice low. "The vault could be a trap. If the unweavers are waiting, you'll be on the front line." Amina nodded, her resolve unshaken. "I've seen the echoes. They're guiding me to the thread. If we don't act, the unweavers will." Park relented, her expression a mix of trust and concern. "Take Vega and Nishara, and keep the QAR link active. We'll be ready to pull you out if things go wrong." The probe team assembled in the Arcadia's launch bay, their suits equipped with quantum stabilizers to protect against the vault's volatile energies. Vega's calm efficiency balanced Amina's intensity, while Nishara's ethereal presence offered a connection to the lattice's deeper rhythms. The probe, a sleek craft studded with sensors, hummed softly as they boarded, its systems synced with the QAR as the probe launched. The loom filled the viewport, its crystalline surface refracting the sparse light of the reaches into a kaleidoscope of colors. The vault's entrance was a circular portal, its edges glowing with a faint, pulsating energy. Amina's heart pounded as the probe approached, the QAR's counterharmonic weaving a path through the unweaver's interference. The portal opened with a surge of light, revealing a tunnel of shimmering filaments that pulsed with the lattice's heartbeat. The probe slipped inside, its sensors flooding with data, quantum signatures that hinted at the first weavers, technology, encoded memories of creation, and a faint trace of the echo's consciousness. Inside the vault, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber, its walls a mosaic of crystalline panels that glowed with an inner light. At the center, suspended in a web of filaments, was the first thread, a radiant, pulsating orb of energy that seemed to breathe with the lattice's rhythm. It was smaller than Amina had expected, no larger than a human heart, but its presence was overwhelming, a nexus of power that held the web together. Nishara's tendrils wove a pattern of reverence. "The thread," she whispered. "The seed of the lattice, woven by the first weavers at the dawn of time. It is the balance of creation and destruction, the heart of all that is." Vega's voice was steady but odd. "The quantum signatures are off the charts. It's not just energy, it's a state of consciousness, a repository of the lattice's memory." Amina approached the thread, her suit's sensors humming with data. The Weaver of Echoes appeared before her, its luminous form coalescing from the filaments. "You have come," it said, its voice a symphony of light. "The thread is yours to guard, but its power is a burden. Choose wisely." Before Amina could respond, the vault shuddered, a discordant pulse ripping through the chamber. The unweaver's craft materialized outside the portal, its void pulse tearing at the filaments. The thread flared, its light flickering as the lattice's balance faltered. "They're here," Vega shouted, her hands flying over the probe's controls. "The interference is destabilizing the vault." Amina's mind raced, her connection to the echoes guiding her. "We need to stabilize the thread." "Nishara, can you link with the lattice?" The weaver nodded, her tendrils weaving a complex pattern that resonated with the thread's pulse. Amina activated the probe's QAR link, channeling the Arcadia's resonator to reinforce the vault's harmonics. The chamber trembled, the crystalline walls cracking under the strain of the unweaver's attack. For hours, the team fought to hold the thread's balance, their efforts a desperate symphony of science and will. The unweaver's void pulses clashed with the QAR's harmonics, each impact sending shockwaves through the lattice. Amina felt the Weaver of Echoes' presence, its light bolstering her resolve. "Guard the thread," it urged. "Guard the web." As the battle reached its peak, the thread pulsed brighter, its energy surging through the vault. The unweaver's craft recoiled, its void pulse dissipating in the face of the lattice's power. The chamber stabilized, the thread's light steady and strong. Exhausted, the probe team returned to the Arcadia, their data a treasure trove of revelations. The thread was not just a power source but a living entity, a fragment of the first weaver's consciousness that held the lattice's balance. Its stabilization had strengthened the web, but the Unweaver's retreat was temporary, a prelude to a greater conflict. Back aboard the Arcadia, the crew gathered to process the vault's secrets. The thread's quantum signatures revealed glimpses of the first Weaver's history, a civilization that had woven the lattice to connect galaxies, only to vanish in a cataclysm of their own making. The echoes, their remnants, had become the web's guardians, watching over its balance through millennia. Amina's visions grew clearer, the weaver of echoes speaking in fragments of memory and warning. The thread is the key, it said, but its power tempts those who seek dominion. The Unweavers will return, and others will follow. On Earth, the cosmic web accord faced a crisis. Kale Varn, the charismatic diplomat leading a rogue human faction, gained influence, his rhetoric of dominance resonating with those disillusioned by the Accord's restrictions. The filament watchers protested in the streets, their cries for preservation drowned out by calls for power. Lena Sado's diplomacy faltered, the balance of unity and greed tipping toward chaos. Aboard the Arcadia, the crew grappled with their role. The thread's stabilization had bought time, but the Unweaver's threat loomed larger. Nishera warned that the vault's opening had awakened the lattice's deeper currents, drawing the attention of other ancient forces, entities that had slumbered since the first Weaver's fall. Captain Park addressed the crew, her voice resolute. "We've entered the vault and touched the heart of the lattice, but our mission is far from over. The thread is our responsibility, and we must protect it, no matter the cost." Amina felt the weight of her visions, the weaver of echoes, call a fire in her chest. The lattice was not just a network but a living cosmos, its balance hinging on humanity's choices. The Unweavers were a shadow, but the true test lay within, whether humanity could rise as guardians or fall to the temptation of power. As the chapter closes, the Arcadia prepares to depart the shattered loom, its crew forever changed. The void reaches loom around them, a realm of shadow and secrets, where the lattice's past and humanity's future collide. The first thread pulses in the vault, a fragile hope in a cosmos on the brink. The journey continues, a sacred dance through the vault of echoes, where the web's song whispers of challenges yet to come, word count and notes. Chapter 10, Shadows of Earth. The Arcadia drifted in the aftermath of the shattered loom's vault, its hull bathed in the faint, flickering light of the void reaches, sparse filaments. The first thread, that radiant orb of quantum consciousness, pulsed in the ship's databanks, not a physical artifact but a cascade of encoded memories, a seed of the lattice's soul that the crew had fought to stabilize. The victory had been hard-won, a fleeting harmony against the Unweaver's relentless void pulses, but it had left the crew with more questions than answers. The cosmic web was alive, its balance fragile, and humanity's role as its guardian hung in the balance. Commander Amina Reyes sat in her quarters, her journal open before her, its pages filled with sketches of the first thread's spiraling patterns and cryptic phrases from her visions. The weaver of echoes, that luminous figure of light and memory, had grown more vivid, its voice a constant presence in her waking hours. The thread is the key, it had whispered in the vault, but its power tempts those who seek dominion. The words weighed on her, a reminder that the lattice's fate was intertwined with humanity's choices, not just in the stars but on Earth, where the cosmic web accord faced a rising tide of division. The ship's comms crackled to life, pulling Amina from her thoughts. Captain Lyon Park's voice was calm but urgent. "Commander Reyes, report to the bridge. We've received a priority transmission from Earth. It's complicated." Amina hurried to the command center, where the crew gathered around a holographic display. The transmission was a patchwork of encrypted signals, relayed through the lattice's filaments from the United Earth Assembly. Ambassador Lena Sado's face appeared, her expression strained, her usual poise fraying at the edges. "Arcadia, this is Sado," she began, her voice steady but laced with tension. "The Accord is under threat. A faction led by Kale Varn has gained significant influence, rallying support for unrestricted access to the lattice. They're calling it the New Dawn Initiative, promising wealth and power through the web's resources. We're holding the line, but we need your data on the first thread to prove the lattice's sentience and its fragility. Doctor." Soren Malik, standing nearby, crossed his arms, his skepticism sharp. "Varn, the diplomat who pushed for corporate contracts on Mars, he's a populist with a knack for exploiting fear. If he's got traction, it's because people are scared or greedy." Lieutenant Vega, her fingers poised over her console, nodded. "The lattice scans from the vault could help. The thread's quantum signatures show it's not just energy, it's a conscious system. If we transmit that data, it might sway the assembly. Nishara, the Vonari weaver, glided forward, her bioluminescent tendrils weaving patterns of concern. "The lattice feels the discord on your world," she said softly. "Its filaments resonate with your divisions, amplifying the unweaver's influence. If humanity fractures, the web will weaken." Amina's heart sank. The visions of the Weaver of Echoes had shown her a cosmos bound by balance, but Earth's turmoil threatened to unravel that harmony. She turned to Captain Park. "We need to send the data, but we can't leave the reaches yet. The unweavers are still out there, and the thread stabilization is fragile." Park's eyes narrowed, her mind weighing the cosmic and terrestrial stakes. "Agreed. We transmit the vault data to Sato, but we hold position to monitor the loom. Vega, encrypt the transmission using the QAR's protocols. We can't risk interception by Varn's allies or the shaded web." The crew set to work, their movements a blend of precision and urgency. Vega and Amina compiled the vault's data, quantum signatures, encoded memories, and fragments of the first Weaver's history into a secure transmission. The QAR hummed softly, its harmonics weaving the signal into the lattice's filaments, a whisper of truth sent across light years to Earth. But as the transmission launched, the ship's sensors flared. A faint distortion rippled through the void reaches, a shadow in the lattice's currents. The unweaver's craft had not returned, but something else was stirring, an echo of their dark currents, woven into the filaments like a virus. "Another interference pattern," Vega reported, her voice tight. "It's subtle, but it's targeting the loom. If it reaches the thread, it could destabilize the vault again." Malik's frown deepened. "This isn't just the unweavers. The pattern's too refined, almost human." Could Varn's faction have tech capable of this? The possibility hung in the air, a chilling reminder that the lattice's enemies were not only alien but human. The shaded web, that shadowy coalition of opportunists, had been whispering in Earth's corridors, their influence seeping into the New Dawn initiative. If Varn's faction had access to lattice-disrupting technology, the Accord, and the web itself, faced a threat from within on Earth, the United Earth Assembly buzzed with a tension that mirrored the Arcadia's. Lena Sato stood before a sea of delegates, her voice a steady beacon amidst the chaos. The chamber, a vast dome of glass and steel in Geneva, was alive with holograms, data streams from colonies, corporate projections, and filament watchers, protests projected on floating screens. The air was thick with voices, some calling for unity, others for dominance. Cale Varn, a tall figure with sharp features and a charismatic smile, took the podium. His tailored suit and measured tone belied the radical fire in his words. "The cosmic web is humanity's destiny," he declared, his voice carrying across the chamber. "For too long, we've cowered before its mysteries, bound by the Accord's restrictions. The New Dawn initiative offers a future of prosperity, resources, technology power. Why should we kneel to alien warnings when we can claim the stars?" The chamber erupted in cheers and jeers, the divide stark. Governor Jakub Petrov, joining via hologram from Mars, countered with a voice of quiet conviction. "The lattice is not a resource to be plundered," he said. "It is a living system, a shared inheritance. The Arcadia's data proves its sentience. To exploit it is to risk our future." Sato stepped forward, her eyes scanning the crowd. "The Arcadia's transmission is incoming," she announced. "Their findings in the void reaches confirm the lattice's consciousness, a network that connects not just stars but histories, minds, and responsibilities. We must act as stewards, not conquerors." The data arrived, a cascade of quantum signatures projected across the chamber. The first thread's patterns danced in the air, spirals and fractals that pulsed with an otherworldly rhythm. Gasps rippled through the delegates, the evidence undeniable. Yet Varn's smile did not falter. "Impressive," he said, his tone smooth. "But sentience does not mean fragility. The lattice has endured for eons. Why should we fear using its power? The Arcadia's crew are explorers, not gods. Their caution is weakness, not wisdom." The words struck a chord with the disillusioned, and Sato felt the tide shifting. The filament watchers, gathered outside, chanted for preservation, their voices drowned out by corporate-backed factions chanting Varn's name. The Accord hung by a thread, its unity fraying as greed and fear took root. Aboard the Arcadia, the crew grappled with the interference in the void reaches. Amina stood at the QAR's interface, her hands weaving harmonics to counter the distortion. The pattern was indeed human, a subtle manipulation of the lattice's currents, laced with the shaded web signature. It was as if Varn's faction had learned to mimic the unweaver's dark currents, a betrayal that cut deeper than any alien threat. Nishara's tendrils wove a pattern of urgency. "The lattice feels the discord on your world," she said. "The interference is not just technology, it is intent, a hunger for control. If it reaches the thread, the web will fracture." Captain Park's voice was resolute. "We need to trace the interference to its source. Vega, can you isolate the signal's origin?" Vega's fingers flew across her console, her eyes narrowing. "It's coming from a relay node in the lattice, not far from the loom. But it's masked, encrypted with human tech, not Vonari or Unweaver. Whoever's behind this has access to advanced quantum systems." Malik's skepticism flared. "Helix Dynamics," he said, his voice low. "Varn's got corporate backing, and Helix has been experimenting with lattice tech since Gliza. They could be feeding him the tools to disrupt the web." The revelation hit Amina like a shockwave. Her visions of the Weaver of Echoes had warned of dominion, of those who would unravel the lattice for power. If humanity itself was complicit, the balance she sought to protect was more fragile than ever. Park made the call. "We deploy a probe to the relay node. Amina, you lead the team. Find the source and neutralize it. We can't let this interference reach the thread." The probe team assembled, Amina joined by Vega and a young engineer named Tarek, whose expertise in quantum relays rivaled Rourke's. Nishara remained on the Arcadia, her connection to the lattice guiding the ship's defenses. The probe launched, its sensors cutting through the void reaches darkness to the relay node, a small crystalline structure pulsing with a corrupted rhythm. As they approached, Amina's visions intensified. The Weaver of Echoes appeared, its light flickering with urgency. "The shadow grows," it warned. "The thread is not safe." The node came into view, its surface marred by human-made devices, Helix Dynamics tech, grafted onto the lattice like a parasite. Tarek's voice was tense. "These are quantum disruptors, designed to manipulate filament resonance. They're siphoning energy from the loom, redirecting it to somewhere." Vega's scans confirmed the worst. The energy is being relayed back to Earth or a colony. It's a power grab, using the lattice as a battery. Amina's heart pounded. The interference was no accident. It was a deliberate act, Varn's faction exploiting the web's energy while weakening its balance. She activated the probe's QAR link, weaving a counterharmonic to neutralize the disruptors. The node trembled, its corrupted rhythm faltering as the lattice's natural pulse returned, but the victory was short-lived. A new signal erupted, sharp and discordant, echoing the Unweaver's void pulses. The node flared, its energy surging in a cascade that threatened to overwhelm the probe. Amina's vision blurred, the Weaver of Echoes appearing once more. "Hold the balance," it urged. "The shadow is near." The probe team fought to stabilize the node, their efforts a desperate race against the cascade. The QAR's harmonics clashed with the disruptor's dissonance, each pulse a battle for the lattice's soul. Hours passed in a blur, the team's focus unwavering despite the strain. Finally, the node stabilized, its energy realigning with the loom's rhythm. The human-made disruptors fell silent, their power severed. The probe returned to the Arcadia, its data confirming the involvement of Helix Dynamics and Varn's New Dawn initiative. Back on the ship, the crew convened, their faces grim. The relay node's disruption was a warning, a sign that humanity's divisions were as dangerous as the Unweaver's assaults. Amina shared her findings, her voice steady despite the weight of betrayal. "Varn's faction is using the lattice's energy to fuel their agenda. They're not just challenging the Accord, they're weakening the web itself." Park's expression was unreadable, her calm masking a storm. "We need to warn Sato. If Varn's got Helix tech, he could destabilize the entire lattice from Earth. Vega, prepare another transmission, maximum encryption." Nishara's light dimmed, her voice heavy. "The lattice feels the wound. The thread is safe for now, but the shadow on your world grows. The balance cannot hold if your people turn against the web." Amina's mind raced, her visions of the Weaver of Echoes a constant guide. The lattice was a living cosmos, its fate tied to humanity's choices. The Unweavers were a shadow, but Varn's ambition was a mirror, a reflection of humanity's own flaws. On Earth, Sato received the Arcadia's warning, her resolve hardening. She rallied the Accord's supporters, presenting the relay node's data to the Assembly. The evidence was damning: Helix Dynamics, tech, Varn's rhetoric, and the lattice's weakening filaments. Yet Varn's influence grew, his New Dawn initiative gaining ground among colonies hungry for power. The filament watchers took to the streets, their protests a chorus of defiance. "Protect the web," they chanted, their voices echoing through Geneva's domes. Petrov's coalition pushed for sanctions against Helix, but corporate interests held sway, their promises of prosperity drowning out the call for stewardship. As the chapter closes, the Arcadia holds position in the void reaches, its crew caught between cosmic duty and earthly strife. The first thread pulses in the shattered loom, a fragile hope amidst growing shadows. Amina stands on the observation deck, the weaver of echoes, light a beacon in her mind. The lattice whispers of balance, but the discord on Earth threatens to unravel it all. The journey continues, a dance through shadows, where humanity's future hangs by a thread. Chapter 11. The pulse awakens the Arcadia, hung in the desolate expanse of the void reaches, its hull a fragile beacon against the sparse, flickering filaments of the cosmic web. The shattered loom loomed nearby, its crystalline structure pulsing faintly, a testament to the crew's hard-won victory in stabilizing the first thread. Yet the lattice's heartbeat was restless, its rhythm stirred by the human-made disruption at the relay node, a wound inflicted not just by the unweavers, but by humanity's own ambition. The web, alive and sentient, seemed to hum with a warning, as if sensing a storm gathering beyond the stars. Commander Amina Reyes stood on the observation deck, her eyes tracing the dim threads of light that wove through the darkness. The weaver of echoes, that radiant figure of memory and light, had grown more vivid in her visions, its presence a constant guide. The shadow grows, it had warned, its voice a cascade of harmonics that lingered in her mind. The thread awakens, and the cosmos listens. The first thread, that quantum seed of the lattice's consciousness, was no longer dormant. Its stabilization had sent ripples through the web, stirring forces older than humanity, older even than the Vanari. The ship's comms crackled, pulling Amina to the bridge. Captain Lyon Park stood at the helm, her calm authority a steady anchor amidst the crew's mounting unease. The holographic display flickered with new data, a cascade of quantum signatures that pulsed with an intensity that set the sensors ablaze. "Lieutenant Vega, report," Park said, her voice cutting through the tension. Vega's fingers danced across her console, her face illuminated by the glow of erratic patterns. "The lattice is singing," she said, her voice a mix of awe and alarm. The first thread's stabilization triggered a resonance wave, spreading through the filaments. It's not just local, it's propagating across the entire web, from the void reaches to the nexus core and beyond. Dr. Soren Malik, his skepticism tempered by the data, leaned over his own display. "This isn't just resonance," he said, his tone sharp but curious. "The wave is carrying encoded patterns, fractals, harmonics, even fragments of what look like memories. It's as if the thread is communicating, waking something up." Nishara, the Vanari weaver, glided forward, her bioluminescent tendrils weaving intricate patterns that mirrored the lattice's pulse. "The echoes are stirring," she said softly, her voice heavy with reverence. "The thread's awakening has called them forth not as visions, but as entities. They are the lattice's guardians, its memory made manifest. But their awakening draws others, those who have slumbered since the first weaver's fall." Amina's heart quickened, her visions flashing with the weaver of echoes' luminous form. "Entities?" she asked. "You mean the echoes are becoming physical?" Nishara's eyes, pools of starlight, met hers. "Not physical as you understand it, but present voices in the lattice, woven from its light. They will guide those who seek balance, but they will judge those who seek dominion." The thread's pulse has also drawn the eyes of the Sentinels, an ancient order who once served the first weavers. They are neither friend nor foe, but they will test your worth. The bridge fell silent, the crew absorbing the weight of Nishara's words. The cosmic web was not just a network of energy and memory. It was a living cosmos, its awakening a call to all who walked its threads, human, Vanari, unweaver, and now the Sentinels, a new force whose intentions were shrouded in mystery. Captain Park's expression hardened. "We need to understand this resonance wave. Vega, can we track its path? And Malik, I want a full analysis of those encoded patterns. If the echoes are manifesting, we need to know what they're saying and what the Sentinels want." As the crew set to work, Amina felt the weaver of echoes' presence, its light pulsing in her mind. "The pulse awakens," it whispered. "Seek the Sentinels, but beware their judgment." The vision faded, leaving her breathless but resolute. The lattice was calling, and she could not turn away. The resonance wave rippled through the lattice, its effects felt far beyond the void reaches. On Earth, the United Earth Assembly was a cauldron of chaos, the cosmic web accord fraying under the weight of Kale Varn's New Dawn initiative. Lena Sato stood before the delegates, her voice a beacon of reason amidst the storm. The Arcadia's data on the first thread had bolstered her case, its quantum signatures proving the lattice's sentience, But Varn's rhetoric was a siren song, promising power and prosperity to a world weary of restraint. Varn took the podium, his charismatic smile masking a ruthless ambition. "The lattice is humanity's birthright," he declared, his voice echoing through the chamber. "The Arcadia's findings confirm its power, energy to fuel our colonies, technology to surpass our rivals." "Why cower before alien warnings when we can shape the cosmos?" The chamber erupted, delegates divided between cheers and protests. Governor Jakub Petrov, his hologram flickering from Mars, countered with quiet conviction. "The lattice is alive," he said. "Its awakening is a warning, not an invitation. The Arcadia reports a resonance wave, a sign that our actions ripple beyond Earth. We must unite as stewards, not plunderers." Outside, the filament watchers swelled, their protests a chorus of defiance. "Protect the web," they chanted, their signs glowing with holographic threads that mimicked the lattice's filaments. But corporate interests, led by Helix Dynamics, fueled Varn's rise, their quantum disruptors, exposed by the Arcadia's probe, now a closely guarded secret. Whispers of the shaded web's influence grew, their agents weaving discord through backroom deals and encrypted signals. Sato received the Arcadia's latest transmission, a warning of the resonance wave and the awakening echoes. The data was staggering, fractals that encoded histories of lost civilizations, harmonics that pulsed with consciousness, and faint traces of a new presence, the Sentinels. She shared the findings with the Accord's allies, her resolve hardening. "The lattice is waking," she told the assembly. "If we exploit it, we risk its wrath. The Arcadia's crew are our guardians, they need our support, not our division." Varn's influence was relentless, his New Dawn initiative gaining ground among colonies desperate for resources. The balance of the Accord hung by a thread, its fate tied to the Arcadia's mission in the stars. Aboard the Arcadia, the resonance wave's effects were immediate and profound. The ship's sensors flared with new data, the lattice's filaments pulsing with a rhythm that felt alive, almost sentient. The QAR hummed with increased intensity, its harmonics struggling to align with the wave's erratic cadence. The crew worked tirelessly, their hands a choreography of science and hope, mapping the wave's path and decoding its patterns. Amina stood at the QAR's interface, her connection to the weaver of echoes guiding her. The visions were no longer fleeting glimpses but a dialogue, a communion with the lattice's soul. She saw glimpses of the first weavers, beings of light and energy, weaving the web to connect galaxies, only to fall in a cataclysm of their own making. The echoes, their remnants, were now awakening, their voices a chorus of guidance and judgment. As the crew analyzed the wave, a new anomaly appeared, a shimmering presence in the lattice, not a ship but a convergence of filaments that pulsed with a distinct rhythm. The sensors identified it as a sentinel node, a focal point of the lattice's energy where the sentinels, those ancient guardians, were said to manifest. "Nishara, what can you tell us about the sentinels?" Park asked, her voice steady but urgent. The weaver's tendrils wove a pattern of reverence and caution. "The sentinels are the first weavers, enforcers, tasked with protecting the lattice's balance. They are neither ally nor enemy, but they judge those who walk the web. Their forms are woven from the filaments, their minds a fragment of the first weaver's will. If they deem you unworthy, they will sever your thread." Malik's skepticism flared. "Sever our thread? That's a myth, not science. If these sentinels are real, they're likely advanced AI or quantum constructs. We need to study them, not fear them." Amina's voice was soft but firm. "They're more than constructs. I felt them in my visions, the echoes speak of them as judges, not machines. We need to approach with respect, not just analysis." Park nodded. "We investigate the sentinel node, but we proceed with caution. Amina, prepare a probe team. Vega, keep the QAR on high alert. If the sentinels are waking, we need to know their intentions." The probe team assembled, Amina joined by Vega, Tarek, and a new addition, Dr. Alara Chen, a xenobiologist whose expertise in alien consciousness had proven invaluable. Nishara remained on the Arcadia, her connection to the lattice anchoring the ship's defenses. The probe launched, its sensors cutting through the void reaches, darkness to the sentinel node, a radiant convergence of filaments that pulsed with a rhythm both alien and familiar. As they approached, the node flared, its light coalescing into a form, a towering figure woven from filaments, its surface shimmering with fractals that pulsed with consciousness. It was not the weaver of echoes, but something sterner, its presence a weight that pressed against the probe's hull. "Greetings, travelers," the figure said, its voice a harmonic cascade that resonated through the lattice. "I am Calith, sentinel of the first weavers. You have awakened the pulse, stirring the web's heart. Why do you seek the thread? Amina's heart pounded, her visions guiding her response. We seek to guard the lattice, she said, her voice steady despite the awe. The first thread is the web's balance, and we are its stewards, but the unweavers and others threaten its stability. We ask for your guidance. Calith's form pulsed, its fractals shifting in judgment. The thread is a power beyond your kind, yet you claim guardianship. Your world is divided, its shadows weaving discord into the web. Prove your worth or be severed. The node trembled, a surge of energy testing the probe's defenses. Vega's hands flew across the controls, stabilizing the QAR link, while Tarek and Chen analyzed the Sentinel's signatures. The figure's presence was overwhelming, its harmonics probing the team's intent, searching for truth or deceit. Amina felt the weaver of echoes light, its guidance bolstering her resolve. We seek balance, she said, her voice a thread in the lattice's song. Humanity is flawed, but we learn. Guide us and we will protect the web. Calith's form stilled, its judgment complete. You are earnest but untested. The pulse has awakened the lattice, and others will come, those who seek the thread's power. The sentinels will watch, but we do not intervene. Prove your worth in the trials ahead. The node flared, its light dissipating as Calith vanished. The probe's sensors captured a final burst of data, encoded histories of the first weavers, warnings of the unweavers' ancient grudge, and a map of the lattice's deeper currents, where new threats stirred. The probe team returned to the Arcadia, their data a treasure trove of revelations. The Sentinels were not allies, but judges, their role to ensure the lattice's balance. The resonance wave, triggered by the thread's activation, had awakened not just the echoes but other ancient forces. Factions that had slumbered since the first Weaver's fall, now drawn to the thread's power. On Earth, the wave's effects were felt in subtle ways. Communications disrupted, quantum relays flickering, and a growing unease among the colonies. Sato used the Arcadia's data to rally the Accord, but Varn's New Dawn initiative gained ground, his promises of power resonating with those who saw the lattice as a resource, not a responsibility. The Filament Watchers grew bolder, their protests spreading to Mars and Titan. The web is alive, they chanted, their voices a counterpoint to Varn's ambition. Petrov's coalition pushed for unity, but Helix Dynamics' influence loomed, their quantum disruptors a hidden threat. Aboard the Arcadia, the crew faced a new reality. The Sentinel's warning had clarified the stakes, the thread's awakening had set the lattice on a path of transformation, and humanity's role was uncertain. Amina shared her visions, her connection to the Weaver of Echoes a guiding light. The Sentinels will judge us, she told the crew, her voice steady. But the lattice chose us as guardians. The pulse is a call to prove our worth, not just to the Sentinels, but to ourselves. Park's eyes met hers, a flicker of pride in her gaze. We hold position and prepare for what's coming. The lattice is waking, and we're its stewards. Whatever trials lie ahead, we face them together. As the chapter closes, the Arcadia stands poised in the void reaches, its crew bound by a cosmic covenant. The resonance wave pulses through the lattice, a song of awakening that echoes across galaxies. The Sentinels watch, their judgment a shadow over humanity's future. Amina feels the Weaver of Echoes light, its call of fire in her chest. The web sings of trials and hope, a dance through the pulse of eternity, where the fate of the cosmos hangs by a thread. Chapter 12. The Unweaver's gambit. The Arcadia stood poised in the void reaches, its hull a fragile beacon amidst the sparse, flickering filaments of the cosmic web. The resonance wave, triggered by the first thread's awakening, still rippled through the lattice, its harmonics a song of transformation that echoed across galaxies. The shattered loom pulsed faintly nearby, its crystalline vault guarding the thread, a quantum seed of the lattice's consciousness, a fragile heart that held the balance of creation and destruction. Yet the air aboard the ship was thick with tension, as if the cosmos itself held its breath, awaiting the final test of humanity's worth. Commander Amina Reyes stood at the heart of the command center, her hands steady on the quantum adaptive resonator, QAR, though her mind thrummed with the Weaver of Echoes' presence. The luminous figure had grown ever-present, its voice a cascade of harmonics guiding her through the lattice's labyrinth. The thread is the key, it had whispered in her latest vision, but its power is a crucible. Guard it or all will unravel. The words were a fire in her chest, a call to guardianship that had shaped her journey from Gliza to the void reaches. The crew moved with a quiet intensity, their faces etched with resolve and exhaustion. The Sentinel Calith's judgment lingered in their minds, a warning that the lattice would test them, that the awakening pulse had drawn ancient forces to the thread. The Unweavers, that coalition of shadows bent on unraveling the web, were gathering for a final gambit, their dark currents stirring the filaments. And on Earth, Kale Varn's New Dawn initiative threatened the cosmic web accord, its human ambition a mirror to the Unweavers' chaos. Captain Lyon Park stood at the helm, her calm authority a lodestone amidst the storm. Lieutenant Vega, status on the lattice scans. Vega's fingers danced across her console, her eyes narrowing at the holographic display. The resonance wave is intensifying, she reported, her voice tight. The thread's energy is amplifying the filaments, but there's a new distortion, a massive void pulse converging on the shattered loom. It's the Unweavers, and they're not alone. Dr. Soren Malik, his skepticism now tempered by the lattice's undeniable sentience, leaned over his display. The pulse is layered, Unweaver signatures mixed with human tech. Helix dynamics, disruptors are amplifying their attack. Varn's faction must be feeding them data from Earth. Nishera, the Vonari Weaver, glided forward, her bioluminescent tendrils weaving patterns of urgency. The Unweavers seek the thread to sever it, she said, her voice heavy with warning. If they succeed, the lattice will collapse and with it the balance of the cosmos, but the Echoes and Sentinels watch. They will aid those who prove worthy. Amina's heart pounded, her visions flashing with the Weaver of Echoes light. The Sentinels, she said softly. Kalith said they judge us. If we protect the thread, will they help? Nishera's eyes, pools of starlight, met hers. The Sentinels are bound to the lattice's balance. They will not fight your battles, but they will amplify your intent. Show them your heart, and the web will answer. Park's gaze was resolute. Then we make our stand at the loom. Amina, prepare the QAR for maximum output. Vega, deploy probes to track the Unweavers' approach. We defend the thread, no matter the cost. The crew sprang into action, their movements a choreography of science and will. Engineers, led by Rourke, diverted power to the QAR, its harmonics weaving a shield around the loom. Scientists analyzed the void pulse's signatures, searching for weaknesses. The Vonari Weavers, their consciousness linked to the lattice, chanted softly, their tendrils amplifying the ship's resonance. Amina stood at the QAR's interface, her connection to the Weaver of Echoes guiding her. The visions were no longer dreams but a dialogue, a communion with the lattice's soul. She saw glimpses of the first Weavers, beings of light who wove the web to unite galaxies, only to fall in a cataclysm of hubris. The thread was their legacy, a seed of balance that humanity now held in its hands. As the Unweavers' void pulse grew closer, the ship's sensors flared. A fleet of shadowed crafts materialized, their surfaces liquid dark, weaving through the filaments with predatory grace. Their signal was a discordant scream, a cascade of dark currents that tore at the loom's crystalline structure. The thread pulsed erratically, its light flickering as the lattice trembled. Shields to maximum, Park ordered. Amina, stabilize the thread. Amina's hands flew across the QAR, weaving harmonics to counter the void pulse. The ship shuddered, its hull vibrating as the lattice's rhythm faltered. Vega and Tarek worked in tandem, their probes mapping the Unweavers' movements, while Dr. Alara Chen analyzed the pulse's biological signatures, confirming the presence of human tech. Helix dynamics, disruptors, woven into the attack like a betrayal. The battle was a symphony of light and shadow, a clash of harmonies and dissonances that shook the void reaches. The QAR's pulses clashed with the Unweavers' void waves, each impact sending shockwaves through the lattice. The loom's crystalline walls cracked, their light dimming as the thread's stability wavered. In the chaos, Amina's vision blurred, the Weaver of Echoes appearing before her. Hold the thread, it urged, its light a beacon in the storm. The lattice sings through you. The words ignited her resolve, her hands moving with a precision born of instinct and vision. She adjusted the QAR, weaving a counter-harmonic that resonated with the thread's rhythm, a song of balance against the Unweavers' chaos. Hours passed in a blur, the crew's efforts a desperate dance to protect the web. The Unweavers' fleet pressed closer, their void pulses tearing at the filaments, but the Arcadia held firm, its QAR a lifeline to the loom. Nishera's chants grew louder, her tendrils weaving a pattern that amplified the thread's light, calling to the Echoes and Sentinels. Then, a new presence stirred. The Sentinel Kalith appeared, its towering form woven from the lattice's filaments, its fractals pulsing with judgment. You fight for the thread, it said, its voice a harmonic cascade. But your world betrays it. The shadow of your kind weaves discord into the web. Amina's voice was steady, her connection to the Echoes guiding her. We are flawed, but we choose balance. Help us protect the thread, and we will prove our worth. Calith's form pulsed, its judgment hanging in the balance. Then, with a surge of light, the sentinel joined the fray, its harmonics amplifying the QAR's song. The lattice flared, its filaments blazing with renewed strength. The unweaver's fleet recoiled, their void pulses dissipating in the face of the web's power, but the battle was not over. A final void craft, larger and darker than the rest, emerged from the shadows, its signal laced with human tech, a signature Amina recognized from the relay node. "Varn," she whispered, her heart sinking. The New Dawn initiative had not just aided the unweavers, it had joined them, their ambition a mirror to the shadows' hunger. The craft unleashed a massive void pulse, targeting the thread directly. The loom trembled, its crystalline walls fracturing as the thread's light flickered. Amina pushed the QAR to its limits, her hands ablur as she wove a final harmonic. The Weaver of Echoes appeared, its light merging with hers, a communion that felt like eternity. "Now," she shouted, her voice a thread in the lattice's song. The QAR surged, its harmonics resonating with the thread, the loom, and the sentinel's power. The lattice answered, its filaments blazing with a light that drowned the void. The unweaver's craft shattered, its dark currents dissolving into the web's radiance, the loom stabilized, the thread's light steady and strong. The unweaver's fleet retreated, their shadows fading into the void reaches. Calith's form pulsed once more, its judgment complete. "You have proven your worth," it said. "The thread is safe and the lattice endures, but the balance remains fragile. Guard it well." The sentinel vanished, its light merging with the filaments. The Arcadia stood battered but triumphant, its crew exhausted but united. The thread pulsed in the vault, a beacon of hope in a cosmos on the brink. On Earth, the battle's echoes reverberated. The Arcadia's victory sent a new resonance wave through the lattice, a signal of balance that reached the united Earth assembly. Lena Sato stood before the delegates, her voice steady despite the chaos. The data from the void reaches was undeniable, proof of the lattice's sentience, the unweaver's defeat, and humanity's role as guardians. Kale Varn's New Dawn initiative faltered, its alliance with Helix Dynamics exposed by the Arcadia's findings. The relay node's disruptors, linked to Varn's faction, were revealed as a betrayal, their tech a mirror to the unweaver's chaos. The Assembly, shaken by the evidence, rallied behind the accord, voting to sanction Helix and strengthen the framework of stewardship. The filament watchers rejoiced, their protests swelling into a movement that spanned Earth, Mars, and Titan. "The web is alive," they chanted, their voices a chorus of hope. Governor Jakub Petrov's coalition gained ground, forging a unified command to protect the lattice. Sato's diplomacy triumphed, her vision of unity a beacon amidst the shadows, but the victory was not absolute. Whispers of the shaded web lingered, their influence diminished but not eradicated. Varn, disgraced but unrepentant, vanished into the colonies, his ambition a seed that could yet grow. The lattice, though stabilized, bore scars, reminders of the fragility of balance. Aboard the Arcadia, the crew gathered on the observation deck, the shattered looms light a quiet testament to their journey. The thread pulsed in the vault, its rhythm a song of renewal. Amina stood among them, her journal open, its pages now a chronicle of the lattice's soul. The Weaver of Echoes had faded, its light merging with the web, but its guidance remained a fire in her heart. Captain Park addressed the crew, her voice soft but resolute. "We came as explorers, but we leave as guardians. The lattice chose us, not for perfection, but for our willingness to learn. The thread is safe, but our work continues. The cosmos is vast, and we are its stewards." Nishera's tendrils wove a pattern of gratitude. "The web sings of you," she said. "You have woven your thread into its tapestry, a light that will endure." Malik, his skepticism softened by the journey, offered a rare smile. "We've seen the impossible," he said. "Maybe it's time we start believing in the possible." Viga nodded, her eyes bright with hope. "The lattice is alive and we're part of it. Let's keep it that way." The crew shared a moment of silence, their bond forged in the crucible of the stars. The Arcadia prepared to depart the void reaches, its course set for the Nexus core, where new mysteries awaited. The lattice pulsed around them, a living tapestry of light and memory, its song a call to future generations. Amina stood at the viewport, the filaments stretching into infinity. The Weaver of Echoes was gone, but its light lived in her, a reminder that the balance was fragile, but hope was eternal. Humanity had faced the shadows, both alien and human, and chosen stewardship over dominion. The web endured, its threads weaving a future where the cosmos and its guardians could thrive. As the Arcadia slipped into the lattice's currents, the stars blazed brighter, their light a promise of eternity. The journey was over, but the dance continued. a sacred weave through the threads of the cosmos, where humanity's heart found its place among the stars. Epilogue. Threads of eternity. Years later, the cosmic web was no longer a frontier but a shared inheritance. The cosmic web accord, strengthened by the Arcadia's legacy, became a covenant of stewardship, uniting Earth, its colonies, and the Vanari in a pact to protect the lattice. The filament watchers evolved into a global movement, their schools teaching children to listen to the web's song, to weave their lives with care and wonder. Amina Reyes, now a mentor to a new generation of explorers, stood on a Martian plateau, the lattice's filaments visible in the night sky. Her journal, published as Threads of Eternity, had become a guide for those who walked the web, its pages a testament to the balance she had fought for. The Weaver of Echoes was a memory, but its light lived in her teachings, a call to guard the cosmos with humility and hope. The Unweavers remained a shadow, their threat diminished but never gone. The Sentinels watched, their judgment a silent reminder of the lattice's fragility. But humanity had learned, its ambition tempered by wisdom, its curiosity guided by care. As Amina gazed at the stars, a young student approached, her eyes wide with wonder. "Commander Reyes," she asked, "will we ever find the first weavers?" Amina smiled, her hand tracing the air as if weaving a filament. "They're here," she said, "in the lattice, in its song. We don't find them, we become them, one thread at a time." The stars pulsed, the web sang, and the cosmos whispered of eternity, a tapestry woven by guardians, human and alien, bound by a single thread of hope. Chapter 12. The Unweavers' gambit. The Arcadia hung in the desolate expanse of the void reaches, its hull a fragile beacon against the sparse, flickering filaments of the cosmic web. The shattered loom loomed nearby, its crystalline vault pulsing with the first thread, a quantum seed of the lattice's consciousness, a delicate heart that held the balance of creation and destruction. The resonance wave, triggered by the thread's awakening, rippled through the lattice, its harmonics a song of transformation echoing across galaxies, stirring forces older than stars. Aboard the ship, the air was thick with tension, as if the cosmos itself held its breath, awaiting humanity's final test. Commander Amina Reyes stood at the heart of the command center, her hands steady on the quantum adaptive resonator, QAR, her mind alight with the Weaver of Echoes' presence. The luminous figure, a radiant embodiment of the lattice's memory, had become her constant guide, its voice a cascade of harmonics. "The thread is the crucible," it had whispered in her latest vision, "where balance is forged or broken. Guard it and the cosmos sings with you." The words burned in her chest, a call to guardianship that had carried her from the Gliese relics to this moment of reckoning. The crew moved with quiet intensity, their faces etched with resolve and exhaustion. The Sentinel Calith's judgment lingered, a warning that the lattice would test them, that the pulse had drawn ancient forces to the thread. The Unweavers, that coalition of shadows bent on unraveling the web, were massing for a final gambit, their dark currents tearing at the filaments. On Earth, Kale Varn's New Dawn initiative threatened the cosmic web accord, its ambition a mirror to the Unweavers' chaos, amplified by helix dynamics, quantum disruptors. Captain Lyon Park stood at the helm, her calm authority a lodestone amidst the storm. Lieutenant Vega, status on the lattice scans. Vega's fingers danced across her console, her eyes narrowing at the holographic display. "The resonance wave is peaking," she reported, her voice taut. "The thread's energy is amplifying the filaments, but there's a massive void pulse converging on the loom, Unweaver signatures layered with human tech. Helix disruptors, likely fed by Varn's faction. Dr. Soren Malik, his skepticism softened by the lattice's sentience, leaned over his display. "The pulse is complex, multiple vectors, not just one craft. It's a coordinated assault targeting the loom and the thread. There's something else, a secondary signature, faint but distinct. It's not Unweaver, it's Sentinel, but corrupted like a rogue faction." Nishera, the Vanari Weaver, glided forward, her bioluminescent tendrils weaving patterns of urgency. The Unweavers seek to sever the thread, to plunge the web into chaos. But the rogue Sentinels, those who broke from the first Weavers' covenant, seek its power for themselves. They believe they alone are the lattice's heirs. Their judgment is not of balance but of dominion. Amina's heart quickened, her visions flashing with the Weaver of Echoes light. "Rogue Sentinels?" she asked. "Calith said they judge us, but would they side with the Unweavers?" Nishera's eyes, pools of starlight, met hers. "They side with no one. They see all who touch the thread as threats, human, Vanari, or Unweaver. Their test is merciless and their power rivals the lattice itself." Captain Park's gaze hardened. "We defend the thread at all costs. Amina, prepare the QAR for maximum output. Vega, deploy probes to track the unweavers and sentinel signatures. Rourke, reinforce the shields. Dr. Chen, analyze the rogue sentinel patterns. We're fighting on two fronts now. The crew sprang into action, their movements a choreography of science and will. Engineers, led by Rourke, diverted power to the QAR, its harmonics weaving a shield around the loom. Scientists, including Dr. Alara Chen, analyzed the dual signatures, searching for weaknesses. The Vanari weavers chanted softly, their tendrils amplifying the ship's resonance, a prayer to the lattice's soul. Amina stood at the QAR's interface, her connection to the weaver of echoes guiding her. The visions were now a dialogue, a communion with the lattice's consciousness. She saw the first weavers, beings of light weaving the web to unite galaxies, only to fall in a cataclysm of hubris when rogue sentinels sought to control the thread. The thread was their legacy, a seat of balance now in humanity's hands, but its power tempted all who touched it. As the unweavers' void pulse grew closer, the ship's sensors flared. A fleet of shadowed crafts materialized, their liquid-dark surfaces weaving through the filaments with predatory grace. Their signal was a discordant scream, tearing at the loom's crystalline structure. Simultaneously, a rogue sentinel node appeared, a shimmering convergence of filaments, pulsing with a corrupted rhythm that echoed the unweaver's chaos but carried a sterner intent. Shields to maximum, Park ordered. Amina, stabilize the thread. Vega, track the sentinel node. Amina's hands flew across the QAR, weaving harmonics to counter the void pulse. The ship shuddered, its hull vibrating as the lattice's rhythm faltered. Vega and Tarek worked in tandem, their probes mapping the unweavers' movements, while Chen analyzed the rogue sentinel's signatures, confirming their intent to seize the thread. They're not attacking the loom directly, Chen reported. They're targeting the vault, trying to extract the thread's energy. The battle unfolded as a symphony of light and shadow, a clash of harmonies and dissonances that shook the void reaches. The QAR's pulses clashed with the unweavers' void waves, each impact sending shockwaves through the lattice. The rogue sentinel node pulsed erratically, its corrupted harmonics amplifying the chaos, threatening to fracture the loom's crystalline walls. In the chaos,